This episode is brought to you by CuriosityStream. Get free access to Nebula, our new streaming service, when you sign up for CuriosityStream at the link below. For centuries, we've dreamed of exploring the mysterious realm of outer space. As our technology has advanced, we've gotten closer and closer to achieving that goal. We've sent humans beyond Earth to the surface of the moon, and we've spent months at a time aboard specially built space stations to learn more about the effects of zero gravity and outer space in general on the human body and mind. We're slated to send humans to Mars in just a few years. From there, who knows where our next stop will be. Of course, all this progress begs the question, when will we start exploring beyond the solar system? Unfortunately, the answer may be never. In this episode, we're going to take a look at some of the challenges to space travel beyond our home system, including some startling recent discoveries made by the Voyager probe and what they mean for the future of space travel. The Voyager probes are some seriously impressive machines. They were launched back in the 1970s and have been chugging along for over 40 years now, delivering amazing new information to entire generations of scientists. After years of gathering countless critical observations, in 2012, Voyager 1 became the first man-made object to enter interstellar space. What the Voyagers found there was something we never anticipated. But before we talk about that problem, let's consider the first major obstacle for both probes like the Voyagers and shorter-lived equipment like humans: distance. Our solar system is massive. The distance from Earth to the Sun is impressive enough, at an average of 150 million kilometers. But that's just a tiny fraction of the rest of the system. From the Sun at the center to the inner fringe of the Oort cloud, you're looking at somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 astronomical units, or 300 billion to 750 billion kilometers. And from the Sun to the outer reaches of the Oort cloud, the very edge of our solar system, is a staggering 10,000 to 100,000 astronomical units, or 1.5 to 15 trillion kilometers. You can't even begin to wrap your head around that kind of distance. And think, that's just to get out of the solar system, which is a tiny blip in the Milky Way, which is an even tinier blip in the wider universe. Okay, so the solar system is big. So what? That doesn't mean we can't leave it eventually, right? Maybe. The key word there is eventually. Now that we know the distance from the Sun to the outer edge of the Oort cloud, we can calculate some ballpark numbers for how long it would take to travel that distance. Let's start with the fastest object we've ever produced, the Parker Solar Probe. If everything goes according to plan, by 2024 the Parker Solar Probe will be the fastest spacecraft ever, by far. It's expected to reach speeds of almost 700,000 kilometers per hour. Assuming we could build a vessel capable of carrying humans at that speed, we could zip to the edge of the solar system in just 2,446 years. Crazy, right? The fastest space vessel we have, a tiny probe propelled by the immense gravity of the Sun, would take almost 2,500 years to get to the actual edge of the solar system. But wait, didn't the Voyager probes already enter interstellar space? And they travel much more slowly than the Parker probe. Technically, yes, the Voyagers have passed beyond the Sun's magnetosphere, which some consider the edge of the solar system. But the Oort cloud is really the container for the system. Whereas the planets orbit the Sun in a flat plane, the Oort cloud is a giant sphere encompassing the Sun, planets, and asteroid belts. Think of it like the Pokeball for our solar system. Anyway, we'll get back to the Voyager probes in a minute. For a more realistic number, let's look at the fastest spacecraft that can support humans. Currently, the record is held by the crew of the Apollo 10 on their moon mission. As they rocketed back to Earth, their vessel reached a speed of just shy of 40,000 kilometers per hour. That's the fastest human beings have ever traveled. If we assume we could build a vessel to support human life, a lot of it, that could travel at a constant 40,000 kilometers per hour, it would take 42,808 years. That is a very long time. Could we even build a vessel that could survive that long, let alone support hundreds of generations of humans for the journey? It would have to be completely self-sustaining. And now, thanks to the latest insights from Voyager, we have a new challenge to consider. On August 25, 2012, Voyager 1 began gathering data on the interstellar environment, the first spacecraft to do so. Now, 7 years later, NASA has recently announced that the probes have passed beyond the heliosphere, the Sun's magnetic field of influence, and emerged into a region of space far stranger than we could have imagined. As odd as it may seem, it turns out the Sun's magnetic field actually protects us from cosmic rays, preventing a fairly large percentage of them from entering the solar system. Once the Voyagers passed beyond the heliosphere, they were subjected to the full force of this foreign electromagnetic radiation. The probes are fine. They're sturdy machines designed for the most inhospitable environments. But it's fascinating to see just how drastic the jump in radiation was as soon as they passed the threshold into this new region of interstellar space. But the EM radiation wasn't the only thing that spiked. The temperature also shot way up, like by tens of thousands of degrees. It turns out that the region beyond the sun's sphere of influence is full of superheated plasma, a sort of wall of fire surrounding our solar system. We always knew that traveling beyond our home star system would be very difficult. It's been almost half a century since the last person walked on the moon. Space is a challenge. Doing things in space takes time. But finding out that our solar system is surrounded by a cage of superheated plasma, that throws a bit of a wrench in things. The question is, how will this intensely irradiated environment affect future missions, unmanned and maybe eventually those crewed by humans? How will the machinery hold up under long periods of exposure to this super hot plasma? Is this radiation more dangerous than forms we're more familiar with? And if so, what new kinds of shielding will have to be developed to protect sensitive scientific instruments, and even more sensitive human bodies? Well, it would seem that the sun has given us at least part of the answer. Our star keeps the solar system safe by exerting its magnetic force on those that press in from interstellar space. It shields our planet and our neighbors from foreign EM radiation. So, could one possible solution be some kind of mobile EM field? It would have to be pretty strong to keep the stormy interstellar space at bay, but hypothetically it could be done. Of course, that technology is likely decades walked on the moon. Space is a challenge. Machines designed for the most inhospitable environments. But it's fascinating to see just how drastic the jump in radiation was as soon as they passed the threshold into this new region of interstellar space. But the EM radiation wasn't the only thing that spiked. The temperature also shot way up, like by tens of thousands of degrees. It turns out that the region beyond the sun's sphere of influence is full of superheated plasma, a sort of wall of fire surrounding our solar system. We always knew that traveling beyond our home star system would be very difficult. It's been almost half a century since the last person walked on the moon. Space is a challenge. Doing things in space takes time. But finding out that our solar system is surrounded by a cage of superheated plasma, that throws a bit of a wrench in things. The question is, how will this intensely irradiated environment affect future missions, unmanned and maybe eventually those crewed by humans? How will the machinery hold up under long periods of exposure to this super hot plasma? Is this radiation more dangerous than forms we're more familiar with? And if so, what new kinds of shielding will have to be developed to protect sensitive scientific instruments, and even more sensitive human bodies? Well, it would seem that the sun has given us at least part of the answer. Our star keeps the solar system safe by exerting its magnetic force on those that press in from interstellar space. It shields our planet and our neighbors from foreign EM radiation. So, could one possible solution be some kind of mobile EM field? It would have to be pretty strong to keep the stormy interstellar
Mobile
space at bay,
electromagnetic
but
field.
it could be done. Of course, that
Crazy.
technology is likely decades off at best. Not to mention the fact that developing a spacecraft that can sustain human life for the multi-thousand-year voyage to the edge of the solar system is a massive undertaking by itself. So, are we trapped in a little cosmic bubble surrounded by an impassable wall of fire? Those of us alive today will probably never know for sure. There will be many challenges along the way, but the most difficult will be the sheer scale of the solar system. If you'd like to learn more about just how mind-bendingly huge our home system is, check out Miniverse on CuriosityStream. It's a really fun trip through a micro-sized version of our solar system, hosted by astronaut Chris Hadfield and guest like Michio Kaku. If you watch my videos, you'll know that I'm a big fan of CuriosityStream. It's an online streaming service with thousands of nonfiction titles from some of the best filmmakers in the game. I've recently partnered with CuriosityStream to build my new car show, Grand Test Auto, that I host with Joseph from Real Life Lore. Grand Test Auto is available right now on Nebula, a streaming platform built by and for independent creators like CGP Grey, Polyphonic, Real Engineering, Wendover Productions, and of course, Second Thought and Real Life Lore, among others. Because we all appreciate how supportive our fans are, CuriosityStream is offering a free Nebula subscription with every purchase of a year-long CuriosityStream membership. With this bundle, you get the best of both worlds. CuriosityStream is home to high production value documentaries and nonfiction work, whereas Nebula is a place for educational YouTubers to try new things and experiment with different formats. Things the YouTube algorithm would punish us for. CuriosityStream loves independent creators and wants to help us grow our platform, so they're offering Second Thought fans free access to Nebula when you sign up at curiositystream.com/secondthought. When you sign up for CuriosityStream, you get instant access to thousands of nonfiction titles, like Miniverse, and you'll get to watch a bunch of new episodes from Grand Test Auto, as well as other great Nebula originals, like Working Titles, a series dedicated to breaking down popular TV show intros. By signing up for CuriosityStream, you'll be helping not just me, but the entire educational community, as we work together to build a place where we can create exciting new content that just wouldn't be possible on YouTube. Give it a try by signing up using the link below. I promise you'll love it.
The two Voyager spacecraft have been traveling away from Earth for more than 33 years, and they are finally in the outer edge of the solar system. This boundary is marked by the outer reaches of the Sun's magnetic field and solar wind, which form an enormous expanse called the heliosphere. As the solar wind travels out from the Sun, it pushes against the galactic medium and abruptly slows down. This is called the termination shock. Outside this is the heliosheath, where the solar wind slows to a stop, and the magnetic field is bent back by the ionized interstellar wind. The Sun's magnetic field spins opposite directions on the north and south poles, creating a sheet where the two spins meet. This sheet gently ripples as it travels outward, and the ripples get bigger as they go. When this sheet reaches the termination shock, it starts to compress, like water waves hitting a wall. The Voyager spacecraft have now found that after the termination shock, these stacked up ripples of magnetic field form bubbles, shown here as a computer simulation. This discovery has prompted a complete revision of what the heliosheath region looks like. The smooth, streamlined look is gone, replaced with a bubbly, frothy outer layer. This new layer also changes our understanding of how extremely fast-moving particles, called cosmic rays, enter our solar system. When they arrive at the bubble region, they slowly move from bubble to bubble until they can reach smooth magnetic field lines and follow them toward the Sun. The nature of the bubble region explains why Voyager 2 has been seeing variations in the number of energetic particles compared to Voyager 1. Because of its path, Voyager 2 has been passing in and out of the bubble region. When it is in the region, Voyager 2 sees many trapped cosmic rays and electrons. When it is out of the region, the spacecraft sees fewer. Even as the Voyagers answer questions about our solar system, they raise others. For example, scientists aren't clear yet how the bubbly heliosheath is linked to the ribbon feature discovered by Ibex and Cassini. This ribbon shows the emission of energetic particles and seems to indicate some interaction with interstellar space. In the meantime, the Voyager spacecraft continues sending back data, and, after 3 decades, they still have a unique perspective to offer about the universe we live in.
Every 176 years, the 4 planets in our outer solar system present us with a rare opportunity. They'll align in such a unique way that it's possible to use their gravitational forces to slingshot from one planet to the next. A PhD student figured this out back in 1965 during his summer job at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, using just a slide rule and simple computer programs. This insight became part of an ambitious mission to send 2 probes and golden records out into space for a grand tour. The Voyagers took some of the first detailed snapshots of planets and moons. And after cruising for over 43 years with 18 billion kilometers traveled, they're taking humanity into the next great beyond, interstellar space.
And they stopped due to the pressure from the interstellar medium and the wind from the interstellar medium. And the interstellar medium wind is actually created by exploding stars, supernova, all the other stars, the material that are out there are pushing on our bubble, and that is what keeps the shape of it.
In 2012, Voyager 1 started detecting changes in its immediate environment.
We started to see dropouts in particles from the sun and increases in particles from the interstellar medium. And they drop down, and then they go back up again. And then on August 25th of 2012, they just dropped down and stayed down. And similarly, the particles from interstellar space do the opposite. They bumped up and they stayed up.
The plasma instrument on Voyager 1 wasn't working properly, so it was hard to confirm if it really crossed the boundary.
There was a lot of debate, and by a nice coincidence, there was a solar flare that happened 13 months previously, finally reached Voyager 1, and that solar flare excited the plasma around the spacecraft That was when the particle instruments said, hey, we're in interstellar space. We see the change in the particles. Voyager 2 has an active working plasma science instrument. So we saw the density in the plasma change almost instantaneously.
As they travel through the interstellar medium, the sheer scale of the universe really comes into perspective.
Studying the interaction of our star, our sun, with what's beyond it. And when you study our sun, you're studying the energy that's giving us life here on Earth.
Voyager 1 detected unexpected pressure at the edge of our solar system for the first time, giving scientists clues about the dynamics we might find in other star and planetary systems. To keep data like this coming in, the Voyager flight team has to make careful energy management decisions.
We use a nuclear power source that decays at 4 watts per year. And so one of our biggest concerns now, and what will really limit the lifetime of the mission, is just how much power the spacecraft has to continue operations. We also have to pay attention to the temperature of the spacecraft. We don't want to freeze the propellant lines that we use to keep the antenna pointed at the Deep Space Network. It's 20 hours to get the signal from Earth to the spacecraft and 20 hours for the spacecraft to turn around and acknowledge that they got that signal, which really means that the Voyager spacecraft have to be autonomous. They have to be able to sense for themselves what's going wrong, put itself in a safe state. It feels like it's under stress. Our day-to-day engineering activities relate toward keeping the spacecraft warm enough, making determinations of whether we have to turn off another instrument heater or not, and then which instrument would you turn off? All these instruments have been on since 1977. Now, these principal investigators who are in their 80s now, they don't want to see their instrument turn off.
The Voyager engineers are still manning this mission today until the signals eventually stop.
One day we'll come into the office and it won't be there. And that will be the loss of the spacecraft. And that will be a very sad day, but also one where you can reflect on how great the mission was. I think Voyager has touched humanity in many ways. And I think that connects us as humans to space exploration.
Hello wonderful person, today we're going to be once again talking about some of the more recent discoveries in regards to the mysterious dark matter. And in this video we're going to discuss the paper that was recently released that focuses on trying to identify what tiny pieces of dark matter might look like as well, not just the larger pieces that we usually are concerned with. Here, the scientists behind the paper, you can find in the description, decided to try to create simulations and identify some of the smallest and the least massive halos of dark matter that the universe could have produced. And the main reason they wanted to do this is to try to identify the actual origins and of course the composition of the dark matter itself. So let's discuss this in more detail and discover what the scientists found as well. Now first of all, this right here is essentially the nutshell of what the scientists were able to create. By using extremely complex supercomputers, they were able to simulate a virtual universe, and then they were also able to zoom into very small parts of the simulation and discover what the really small parts of the dark matter would look like, assuming of course the simulation here created relatively realistic representation of the dark matter. Although right now we don't really know how accurate this is. But the physics it's based on and the understanding of the universe is based on is pretty much spot on. But normally when I talk about dark matter or whenever there is a new video about discoveries regarding dark matter, there is still a little bit of skepticism from people that might not actually think it's real. Well, I wanted to actually address this because it's really important to understand why a lot of physicists and a lot of scientists today believe that dark matter is the best explanation. Now, I'm not going to go into the details about the observational evidence because there's quite a lot of it and most of it points at the existence of dark matter, if not all of it. I'm going to talk about the actual particle reasons we believe that dark matter exists. Specifically in regards to various discoveries coming from particle accelerators around the planet, most of which came from the Swiss CERN particle accelerator. Now surprisingly, here in Google Earth you can even go on a tiny tour and go inside of CERN, discovering what all of this looks like on the inside as well. If you do have some free time, I encourage you to check this out because it actually looks pretty awesome. But anyway, the idea here is that over the past few decades, CERN discovered some really incredible things about various particles that technically could be created somewhere in the universe. And the more we discover how many different particles could be technically created in extreme cases of the universe, the more we realize that there are just so many different opportunities for dark matter to exist, simply because there are so many different particles that could explain its existence. Now, all of the matter we're familiar with here on planet Earth, for the most part, can be summarized in these two familiar states. But in reality, in the last few decades, we started to discover a lot of really unusual states. Some of them, such as tetraquarks, can actually create a lot of different particles, many of which could have properties that could easily explain what the mysterious dark matter could be made out of and how it could affect the rest of the universe. But as we make more and more discoveries, the physicists started to realize that there are currently just way too many possibilities. So many, as a matter of fact, that it's somewhat difficult to look for the actual dark matter itself. In other words, it's become somewhat impossible to pinpoint what exactly dark matter could be made out of. There are currently way too many candidates and not enough experiments trying to test each of the candidates. And all of these experiments are usually pretty expensive. So what we've discovered from CERN and from other particle accelerators in the last few years and in the last few decades, more and more seems to suggest that dark matter could be some sort of a really exotic particle after all. Possibly even something that we could eventually create inside a particle accelerator. On top of that, every single simulation of the so-called universe in a box, essentially when you try to take a supercomputer and recreate the universe itself by using various parameters and basically create what we would observe somewhere out there in space, do continuously reinforce the idea of dark matter being completely real. But because the dark matter itself seems to be really difficult to pinpoint, most of the modern studies decided to focus on trying to simulate these universes and then really zoom into the maximum amount to try to see what they can discover on the inside. And what you're seeing on the screen is, as of today, the best possible visualization of what very small halos of dark matter might look like. Every single tiny circle you see, that's essentially tiny pieces of dark matter roughly around mass of planet Earth, all of which form these very long tunnel-like structures that then form even larger structures that eventually form the extremely long and very large cosmic web, inside of which each of the galaxies then starts forming with time. And on top of that, every observation we make of the universe seems to reinforce these ideas even more. There really doesn't seem to be a better explanation. Which also of course suggests that whatever the scientists discovered very recently by zooming into the dark matter might also make a lot of sense. And what the scientists in this paper once again confirmed is that, well, first of all, the galaxies and also various stars and various clusters all started forming inside of these very massive, very large cosmic formations, but all of these formations were initially created by the dark matter. So basically, before the first star was born, before the first galaxies were created, this already started to exist. And although the biggest of these structures would contain galactic clusters, really large and very massive structures, the smallest ones could contain things like solar systems and star clusters. In other words, even these smaller tendrils that you see right here, which are also dark matter, would actually contain various star objects, various planetary objects, and in some sense all of this suggests that right now we're also inside of a kind of a smaller dark halo bubble. Now surprisingly, the levels of zoom they were able to achieve here, or the level of detail they were able to see, is somewhat equivalent to looking at the moon from Earth and seeing a tiny insect on the surface. And you can actually see how much they were able to zoom in by looking at one of the illustrations in the paper in the description below, and eventually you'll notice that the zoom itself reaches the cross-section of roughly around 80 light years across, which is the highest and most detailed level we've ever been able to achieve so far. And so assuming the simulations in this paper are correct, this would mean that somewhere along this little hallway that you see right here, you would have a larger chunk of dark matter where the solar system would be located as well, and Earth itself would also be orbiting inside of this little halo of dark matter. But most importantly, other stars would also find themselves along this hallway. And for all we know, one day we might be able to find a way to navigate these dark matter hallways and possibly move across space slightly more efficiently than what we can do right now. Although currently this would be the realm of science fiction, not really actual science. But by identifying the existence of these different types of halos, and also by knowing the actual parameters and of course the structure of these halos, we might actually get a better chance of confirming their existence and of course what they're made out of. Because the scientists behind this paper and many other papers believe that these dark matter particles will actually collide.
Yes.
Contain anything inside of them and could be actually completely by from this paper, it could only mean that we might have detected one of these smaller halos, the ones that are too small to contain anything on the inside. And so the major discovery coming out of this paper is that maybe this is actually what the universe looks like. It's smaller bubbles inside the larger bubbles inside the largest bubbles, which are also connected to one another through these very long cosmic streams. But this is where predictions sort of end, because we don't really know which particle is responsible for producing dark matter. And depending on the particle and depending on what type of an exotic particle it is, it could also be producing some other unusual observations. But one of the other surprising discoveries in this paper is the structure of dark matter itself. It seems that no matter how much mass you give to dark matter, whether it's a big halo or a much smaller one, it seems to have a very similar structure in general. It always seems to have a lot of density on the inside, with density decreasing as you move away from the center. So even though the size and the mass of the halo might be different, even if it's really small or really large, the structure seems to be for the most part the same. And these tiny halos are just as important as the larger ones, simply because their sheer number seems to add up to a really large portion of the total dark matter mass, which implies that instead of trying to discover very large dark halos far away from Earth, we should really try to focus on finding much smaller pieces much closer to our own planet. Although that still means that we need much more sensitive and much more precise gamma ray telescopes pointed at various locations in the night skies. But all of these new studies and all of these new simulations and discoveries take us a few steps closer to finally discovering what this unusual matter is, and most importantly, trying to find out how one day we could possibly use this to help humanity. Just like a lot of other discoveries in particle physics and a lot of discoveries in astronomy, this might not really make sense to us right now, how and why this is important. But just like every other discovery related to space sciences that eventually led to the invention of, for example, MRI or cell phones, at some point all of these discoveries in regards to dark matter might end up creating something absolutely mind-blowing. But for now, we're just going to keep looking, keep trying to find out what exactly it is, and if it's for some reason something that we just didn't understand about the universe, it will still help us improve our understanding and various technologies that we currently use for a lot of other studies as well. Anyway, that's all I wanted to mention about this particular study in regards to dark matter, and you can find more about this in the description below. But once we learn more, I'll make sure to follow this up with another video. Until then, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you still haven't, share this with someone who loves learning about space and sciences, maybe come back tomorrow to learn something else, and maybe support this channel on Patreon or by buying the Wonderful Person t-shirt you can find in the description below. I'll see you tomorrow, space out, and as always, bye bye.
Yo. Alright. Nice.
Hello wonderful person, this is Anton, and in this video we're going to be talking about our own moon. Now, when you look at the moon, you may actually think about different things, but sometimes what I think about is all of those craters that we get to see on the surface of the moon. The moon, as you might already know, has a tremendous amount of craters of various sizes. Some of them are small, but some of them are really huge. And it's the really big ones that I was always fascinated with. Now, when most people look at the actual surface, they actually believe that these dark spots that sometimes look like a face actually are also craters. And to some extent they are right, but it's not really all of them. As a matter of fact, there's only one that we're going to talk about that is a real crater. The rest of the dark spots are actually what's known as mare. They're essentially the leftovers from a tremendously large volcanic eruption that happened several billion years ago, and we've talked about this in one of the previous videos. But today we're talking about the largest craters on the moon, specifically two really big ones. One of them you can't really see, and one of them you actually can. Now, the biggest crater is actually invisible to us simply because it's located on the opposite side of the moon. And it's relatively difficult to see
dark side.
Unless you're actually trained to see these craters. There's actually a lot of them here, but to see this specific crater you need to really zoom out and look right here. And if you kind of look carefully, you'll see that there's a really large circle here. It's a tremendously large crater. This is known as the South Pole Aitken Basin, and it's essentially the biggest crater on the moon, but not really easily visible. The thing is, you can actually see a part of it from Earth. Specifically, if you actually look at the moon how we see it at night, and you look at the southern side, specifically with some sort of a relatively powerful telescope, you'll see the southern rim of this crater. And the southern rim is, well, it's actually really tall mountains. It's basically the kind of a protrusion that was left from the collision that happened here approximately 4 billion years ago. Essentially, let me actually demonstrate this by colliding, let's say, Phobos with the moon. So, okay, that was a little bit too small. Let's pick something bigger, because this was a much larger object that collided with the moon that created this type of a crater. It was actually something that was probably around the size of Vesta, approximately 250 to maybe even 300 kilometers in radius. So a really large object. And so here, when an object collides with the moon, or really with anything, it's going to form a really large, a hole-like crater, but it's also going to create these relatively tall borders. And these borders right here, they're essentially kind of like mountains, and this is exactly what we see in the southern part of the moon, and technically is visible with a telescope. And these mountains located in the south are known as the Leibniz Mountains, and essentially that's basically the southern tip of this particular crater. But you need to actually go on the darker side of the moon to be able to see the rest of the crater. Now, currently this is actually where the Chinese Chang'e 4 mission is located as well. But because this is such a large place, obviously a lot of things could be happening here. Specifically, the Chang'e 4 is near the von Karman crater, which is part of this very large basin. Now, the interesting thing about this part of the moon is that the crust here, the actual thickness of the crust, is much thinner than everywhere else on the moon. The crust here is only about 30 kilometers, whereas everywhere else on the moon, it's anywhere from 60 to 80 kilometers. And this is really kind of the demonstration of how powerful this collision was, that it squeezed the moon, making this part much thinner. And this protrusion itself, if you were to actually stand in the middle of it, is
After 6 million years of boredom, the evolutionary ascent of our species from the last common ancestor with the chimpanzee, something extraordinary happened to us less than 100,000 years ago, which, by the way, is long after we'd become anatomically modern. It was a kind of emergence into consciousness less than 100,000 years ago, really less than 40,000 years ago, when we became fully symbolic creatures. And this great change has been defined as the single most important step forward in the evolution of human behavior, is intimately associated with the emergence of the great and transcendent rock and cave art all around the world. And over the last 30 years, researchers led by Professor David Lewis Williams at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa and many others have suggested an intriguing and radical possibility, which is that this emergence into consciousness was triggered by our ancestors' encounters with visionary plants and the beginning of shamanism. If you analyze the cave art, there's not time to go into the details here, but there are so many details that make it clear that this was an art of altered states of consciousness, of visions. That plants like the Amanita muscaria mushroom or psilocybin mushrooms appear to have been directly connected with this sudden and radical change. So to investigate this possibility, when I got interested in this mystery, I went down to the Amazon, where there are still surviving shamanistic cultures today, and where they drink the powerful visionary brew ayahuasca, of which the active ingredient is dimethyltryptamine, DMT, which is actually closely related at the molecular level to psilocybin. Now, normally, DMT cannot be activated orally. When we encounter it in the West, it's generally smoked. There's an enzyme in our stomachs called monoamine oxidase, which switches off DMT on contact. But in the Amazon, they've got round this problem, and they say it was the spirits that taught them how to do it. The DMT in the ayahuasca brew is contained in these leaves from a plant that they call chacruna in the Amazon. And there they mix it together with this vine. And out of the 150,000 different species of plants and trees in the Amazon, this is the one that contains a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which switches off that enzyme in our stomachs and allows the DMT in the leaves, when the two are married together and cooked in water, to be absorbed orally, and takes us on a 4-hour journey into extraordinary realms. Now, it's no joke to drink ayahuasca. The ayahuasca brew it has a foul taste, really hideous, and a dreadful smell. And after you've drunk your cup, you'll find within 45 minutes or so that you're sweating, that you're feeling nauseous. Pretty soon you may well be vomiting, you may well have diarrhea. So, nobody's doing this for recreation. And I'd like to add that I don't think any of the psychedelics should be used for recreation. They have much more serious and important mission with humanity. So we're not doing this for fun. But what draws people to ayahuasca again and again to brace themselves for this experience, and you do have to brace yourself, is its extraordinary effects at the level of consciousness. And one of those effects has to do with creativity, and we can see the creative cosmogenic impulse of ayahuasca in the paintings of ayahuasca shamans from Peru, like the paintings of Pablo Amaringo here, those richly saturated colors, the amazing visions that they reproduce. And this creative impulse has also spread to Western artists. Many Western artists now have been deeply influenced by ayahuasca and are also painting their visions. And as these paintings show, another universal experience of ayahuasca is the encounter with seemingly intelligent entities which communicate with us telepathically. Now, I'm making no claim one way or another as to the reality status of these entities we encounter, simply that phenomenologically, in the ayahuasca experience, they are encountered by people all over the world. And most frequently of all, the spirit of ayahuasca herself, Mother Ayahuasca, who is a healer. And although she's kind of the mother goddess of the planet, she seems to take a direct personal interest in us as individuals, to heal our ills, to want us to be the best that we can possibly be, to correct errors and mistakes in our behavior that may be leading us down the wrong path. And this is perhaps why, and it's an untold story really, ayahuasca has been fantastically successful in getting people off harmful addictions to hard drugs such as heroin and cocaine. Jacques Mabit at the Takiwasi Clinic in Peru brings heroin and cocaine addicts out there for a month, gives them 12 ayahuasca sessions, and they have encounters with Mother Ayahuasca during those sessions that lead them not to wish to take heroin or cocaine anymore, and more than half leave completely free of their addiction, never return to it, and don't even have withdrawal symptoms. And the same incredible healing work was being done in Canada by Dr. Gabor Mate until the Canadian government intervened and stopped his healing practice on the grounds that ayahuasca itself was an illegal drug. Now, I have some personal experience of this. I have not been addicted to heroin or cocaine, but I had a 24-year non-stop cannabis habit. And this started off smoking the herb and laterally vaporizing it. But the basic truth is that for 24 years, I was pretty much permanently stoned.
The big elephant,
and,
man. What's going on,
I enjoyed being stoned. And I felt that it helped me with my work as a writer, and perhaps at some point it did. But when I first encountered ayahuasca, I'd already been
Number one on the
cannabis
King's list,
for 16
homie. The
years.
King's Club.
And almost immediately,
How you doing, buddy?
ayahuasca started giving me messages
I'm good.
that this was no longer serving me.
Since I'm
that it
talking,
was
I'm going to
leading me
turn down the
behave in
volume of this, I
negative and
think, when I want to talk over
ways
the guy.
towards others. And of course, I ignored
Like
those
that.
messages for years and
How you
years,
doing, man?
and went back to being stoned.
Chilling? Yeah,
16
me
hours
too,
a
man.
day.
I just finished work. I'm just hanging out.
But that negative
This
behavior
was
that
a
ayahuasca was
banned
pointing
TED
out
Talk by
did actually get worse and worse. I don't want to put down cannabis, and I believe
Graham
it's a
Head
sovereign
Cock,
right
like,
of every adult
several
to
years
choose
ago.
to smoke cannabis if they wish to do so.
He's talking about his
but I think I
cannabis
was
addiction.
overusing it. I think I was abusing
How
it.
you doing,
not using
man?
it
Yo, thanks so much for that
responsibly.
donation, man. I really
more and more
appreciate that.
paranoid, jealous, possessive.
You don't have to donate, you
suspicious. I
know,
was
but if you
subject
do,
to
I really
irrational
appreciate all.
rages. I often made the life of my
cool of
beloved
you.
partner Santha a misery.
Some TED Talks.
And when I went down
incredible,
for
yeah.
my regular encounter with ayahuasca
banned.
in October 2011,
Talks
I
about
was given the
ayahuasca.
most unbelievable kicking
Here we go.
by Mother Ayahuasca. And I was put through an ordeal. It was a kind of life review. And it's not an accident that ayahuasca is the vine of the dead. I was shown my death. And I was shown that if I came to death and what awaits us after death, without having corrected the mistakes that I was making in my life, that it would be a very bad thing to me for me. And actually, Mother Ayahuasca literally took me to hell. And that hell was a little like this hell painted by Hieronymus Bosch, a truly terrible place, and a little like the place that the ancient Egyptians called the judgment hall of Osiris, where our souls are weighed in the scales in the presence of the gods against the feather of truth, of justice, of cosmic harmony. And I was shown that the path I was walking, my abuse of cannabis and the behavior associated with it, was going to lead me to be found wanting in the judgment, and that I might face annihilation in the world beyond death. So perhaps not surprising that when I came back to England later in October 2011, I gave up cannabis, and I've never smoked it again since then. And actually, and again, I'm speaking only personally with no comment on others' use of cannabis, it's as though a monkey has been lifted off my back. I'm liberated in incredible ways. Far from my creativity being inhibited, I find myself writing much more productively, much more creatively, much more focused, and much more efficiently as well. And I've begun to be able to address those negative aspects of my behavior, which cannabis had revealed, and hopefully to make myself slowly, it's a long progress, into a more nurturing, more loving, more positive person. And this whole transformation, it really has been a personal transformation for me, was made possible by this encounter with death that Mother Ayahuasca gave me. And you know, that leads me to ask, what is death? Our materialist science reduces everything to matter. Materialist science in the West says that we are just meat, we're just our bodies. So when the brain is dead, that's the end of consciousness. There is no life after death, there is no soul, we just rot and are gone. But actually, many honest scientists should admit that consciousness is the greatest mystery of science. And that we don't know exactly how it works. The brain's involved in it in some way, but we're not sure how. Could be that the brain generates consciousness the way a generator makes electricity. If you hold to that paradigm, then of course you can't believe in life after death. When the generator's broken, consciousness is gone. But it's equally possible that the relationship, and nothing in neuroscience rules it out, that the relationship is more like the relationship of the TV signal to the TV set. And in that case, when the TV set is broken, of course the TV signal continues. And this is the paradigm of all spiritual traditions, that we are immortal souls temporarily incarnated in these physical forms to learn and to grow.
That's a cool analogy.
And to develop. And really, if we
Right.
want to know about this mystery, the last
When the
people we should
satellite
ask
dies,
are
the signal is
materialist
still there.
scientists. They have
Are we
nothing
the
to say
signal
on
or
that
are
at
we
all.
the
Let's go rather to
receiver?
the ancient Egyptians, who put their best minds to work for
Interesting.
3,000 years on the problem of death and on the problem of how we should live our lives to prepare for what we will confront after death. And the ancient Egyptians expressed their ideas in transcendent art, which still touches us emotionally today, and they came to certain very specific conclusions, that the soul does survive death, and that we will be held accountable for every thought, every action, every deed that we have lived through in our lives. So we better take this precious opportunity to be born in a human body seriously and make the most of it. And in these inquiries into the mystery of death, the ancient Egyptians weren't just exercising their imaginations. They highly valued dream states, and it's now known that they used visionary plants like the hallucinogenic blue water lily. And it's interesting that the ancient Egyptian tree of life has recently been identified as the Acacia nilotica, which contains high quantities of DMT, dimethyltryptamine, the same active ingredient that we find in ayahuasca. Now, it's difficult to imagine a society more different from the society of ancient Egypt than our society today. We hate visionary states in this society. In our society, if we want to insult somebody, we call them a dreamer. In ancient societies, that was praise. And we have erected huge apparatuses of armed bureaucracies who will invade our privacy, who will break down our doors, who will arrest us, who will send us to prison, sometimes for years, for possessing even small quantities of psilocybin or substances like DMT, whether in its smokable form or in the ayahuasca brew. And yet, ironically, DMT is, we now know, a natural brain hormone. We all have it in our bodies, and it's just that its function.
Voice is cracking. He's so nervous. He's talking about illegal shit, like
is opposed in principle
such a
to altered states
forefront.
of consciousness. I mean, billions are being made by the unholy alliance of psychiatrists and big pharma.
It's hard to be the first person to say
overprescribing,
something,
drugs to control
especially at the
so-called
TED
syndromes
level,
like
you know?
depression or attention deficit
the
disorder.
pharmaceuticals.
in
Hell yeah,
teenagers.
this was why I was banned.
And we have a love affair in our society with alcohol. We glorify.
Have you ever heard of MAPS?
this
No,
most
what's
boring
MAPS?
of drugs, despite
Check it out, man.
the
Check it out
terrible consequences that it often has. And of course, we
This
love
is
our
like
stimulants,
18
our
minutes
tea,
total.
our coffee, our energy drinks, our sugar.
yeah, dude, we can put it on
and
after.
huge industries are
5
built
minutes.
around these substances, which are valued because of the way they alter consciousness.
Even if you have a URL, we can put a
But what all
URL.
these approved altered states of consciousness have in common is that none of them contradict or conflict with the basic state of consciousness valued by our
Multidisciplinary
society, which I would
Association of
call the alert,
Psychedelic Studies.
problem-solving state of consciousness, which is good for the more mundane aspects of science. It's good for the
no.
prosecution of warfare. It's good for commerce.
sounds awesome, man.
It's good for politics. But I
Is
think
it
everybody realizes that
is
the
it a
promise
society?
of a
Is it a
society
science society?
over
Do they
monopolistically
have a
based
journal?
on this state of consciousness has proved hollow.
Do they have
And
a
that this
conference, an
model
annual
is
conference?
no longer working. That it's broken in every possible sense
Research
that a model can be broken.
non-profit.
And urgently we need to find
Wow.
something to replace it.
Interesting.
The
Interesting
vast
illegal
problems of
revocation. I'll
global
search for it after.
pollution that have resulted from the single-minded
I'll keep the video
pursuit
playing, but
of
at the bottom right, I'll
profit,
put the URL. We can
horrors
search.
of nuclear
man.
proliferation, the specter of
What do you know
hunger.
about it?
Millions every night go to bed starving, that we can't even solve this problem despite our alert problem-solving state of consciousness. And look what's happening in the Amazon, the lungs of our planet, this precious home of biodiversity. The old-growth rainforest being cut down and replaced with soybean farms so we can feed cattle so that we can all eat hamburgers. Only a truly insane global state of consciousness could allow such an abomination to occur.
Tell me more.
And I did a back-of-an-envelope calculation during the Iraq War. It seems to me that 6 months expenditure on the Iraq War would have solved the problem of the Amazon forever.
Crazy, man.
Would be sufficient to compensate the peoples of the Amazon so that no single tree ever needed to be cut down again to garden and look after that amazing
high-level chemists or psychologists
make that decision as a global community. We can spend countless billions on warfare, on hatred, on fear, on suspicion, on division, but we can't get together the collective effort to save
my opinion, so is
the
like a
lungs
botanist,
of our
but
planet. And this is perhaps why
botanists.
Shamans from the Amazon are now mounting a kind of reverse missionary activity. When I've asked shamans about the sickness of the West, they say it's quite simple.
I'll search for that.
You guys have severed your connection with spirit.
I'm in Canada, eh? I don't know what.
Unless you reconnect with spirit.
How Canadian was that? I'm in Canada, eh?
You're going to bring the whole house of cards down
Canada,
around your heads and ours.
I don't know if
laws rightly or wrongly
apply
they
the same.
That ayahuasca is the remedy for that sickness. And many now are being called to the Amazon to drink ayahuasca, and ayahuasca shamans are traveling throughout the West.
I don't have any of these, right? These aren't my photos. Like this
radar,
straight, those I think both are straight from Wikipedia.
To bring about consciousness change. And it's true that the message of ayahuasca, the universal message, is about the sacred, magical, enchanted, infinitely precious nature of life on Earth. And the interdependence.
Those are pretty heavy, dude. Those are synthetic heavies.
It's impossible to work with ayahuasca.
They're not heavy, but like they're synthetic. They're the synthetic. They're all synthetic.
By this message, and let's not forget that ayahuasca is not alone. That it's part of an ancient worldwide system of the targeted, careful, responsible alteration of consciousness. It's recently been shown by scholars that the kykeon used in the Eleusinian mysteries in ancient Greece was almost certainly a psychedelic brew. That the soma of the Vedas may well have been
for example, like in a mushroom,
there's
way more than just the active ingredient going on.
We have the DMT in the ancient Egyptian
tree
of life. We have the whole global cultures of surviving shamanism, and what it's all about is a state of consciousness that's designed to help us find balance, harmony. The ancient Egyptians would have called anything about that with the universe, and to remain mindful that what we're here to undertake on Earth while immersed in matter is fundamentally a spiritual journey aimed at the growth and perfection of the soul, a journey that may go back to the very origins of what made us human in the first place. And I stand here invoking the hard-won right of freedom of speech to call for and demand another right to be recognized, and that is the right of adult sovereignty over consciousness. There's a war on consciousness in our society, and if we as adults are not allowed to make sovereign decisions about what to experience with our own consciousness while doing no harm to others, including the decision to use responsibly ancient and sacred visionary plants, then we cannot claim to be free in any way. It's useless for our society to go around the world imposing our form of democracy on others while we nourish this rot at the heart of society and we do not allow individual freedom over consciousness. It may even be that we're denying ourselves the next vital step in our own evolution by allowing this state of affairs to continue, and who knows, perhaps our immortal destiny as well. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Graham Hancock, and I'm recording this in December 2014.
And there will be a third volume as well. But this is my book. These are images from Sumer in Mesopotamia, the area occupied by modern Iraq, and what we're looking at here are pictures of the city of Ur, known in the Bible as Ur of the Chaldees, which isn't that old. It's about 2,100, 2,000 civilization. There was an earlier epoch of civilization which was brought to an end by a cataclysmic flood.
Clap, 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 clap. Yeah.
Many Egyptologists will tell you that there is no story of Atlantis in Egypt. And they say that's a problem because Plato claims through his his antecedent Solon that
That's
he got
pretty
the story
interesting
of
though
Atlantis
too.
from Egypt. They
Since
say
you
there's
talk
no
friggin'
story of
mentioned
Atlantis from Egypt, and that's
friggin'
true. There is no
Babylon
single Egyptian text that
and
refers
Mesopotamia and
to
Hammurabi and all that
Atlantis
stuff,
as
dude.
such.
Maybe you'll find
But
this interesting. I don't
there
know.
are the Edfu building texts.
It's pretty
These are very interesting texts. This is a
architectural.
Ptolemaic temple, the Temple of Horus. It's a very mysterious period in our history, and it's really not such a remote history. It's 12,000 years ago or so, which is map. And that's the island, the insular Atlantis. In those days, they made maps the other way round. Normally, we would expect to see Spain and North Africa on the right of the map and the Americas on the left, but Kirchhoff put it the other way. That's actually little me there, stepping down into what's called the Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro. I mean, they look like, in a way, they look like sort of housing estates. In the universal flood myth of India is the story of Manu, figures in known yoga positions. And there are many rich, and the team from the National Institute of Ocean Technography who took these side scan images also did some dredging with regard to Gunung Padang. And that's the little bit of carbon dating that the mainstream archaeologists have done that make them attribute the site to 2,500.
There was a video talking about what was
but
the
even
word?
with the naked eye,
It said an electromagnetic wave generator. Electromagnetic to transverse wall of plasma. I'll search a psychedelic one after.
There are a lot of things out there in the universe that need our attention. Yeah, that's something else. Join us as we explore exactly what's going on here. 138 AUs from our planet. AU means astronomical unit, which in this case means the distance from the Earth to the Sun. So 138 AUs means
Within our observable universe, there are approximately 70 sextillion stars. Plausible that the probability of life starting from scratch, which we call abiogenesis, is a number which is so small that it greatly outweighs the number of opportunities, the number of worlds out there in the universe.
The news bullshit. I just had a feeling.
Hello wonderful person, this is Anton, and this right here is one of the Voyager probes. I don't know which one, maybe one, maybe two, they look exactly the same. Now I wanted to start this video by possibly finding something around the house or possibly understanding of what's out there in their interstellar space compared to what's here in the solar system. But before we start, I'm sure a lot of you will probably ask what this long thing is here and why is it even there. Well, this is actually just a beam-like structure to separate the magnetic that happen here that do create magnetic field in the interstellar space. And what's interesting is that one of the main discoveries here was that both the solar magnetic field and the interstellar magnetic field are actually aligned with each other, which is something we didn't really expect to find. In other words, the magnetic north and south pole for both the solar system and the interstellar space seem to be aligned. And interestingly, in this graph that was presented in one of the papers that you can find in the description below,
probably because the solar system is moving through space
the strength of the magnetic field
on a line
increased when the craft left the solar system space and entered the so-called interstellar space. It actually started increasing right around here. It was not a dramatic change, and then suddenly jumped when the craft entered VLISM, which stands for Very Local Interstellar Medium.
Yeah,
and
we watched a bit of this
The
yesterday.
magnetic field here is pretty active. Its magnetic field obviously changes as well, and this could influence the shape and the size of the actual heliosphere as well. And NASA used the analogy of lungs to try to
I'll
explain
search,
this.
can we leave the heliosphere?
It's as if our sun was breathing. When it's very active, it expands, and when it's not so active, it sort of shrinks in size, which is
Are we trapped? This is the one I started. I started the. This is the one I started with. I started the video with this. I don't know if you saw it. Oh yeah, I'm a math guy, but physics is fine. This is exactly what I wanted to show. Are we trapped in the solar system?
This episode is brought to you by CuriosityStream. Get free access to Nebula, our new streaming
because this
service.
really
Sign up for CuriosityStream at the link below.
Makes us think, if we can't leave the solar system.
For centuries, we've dreamed of exploring the mysterious realm of outer space. As our technology has advanced, we've gotten closer and closer to achieving that goal. We've sent humans beyond Earth to the surface of the moon, and we've spent months at a time aboard specially built space stations to learn more about the effects of zero. The solar system is massive. The distance from Earth to the Sun is impressive enough, at an average of 150 million kilometers. But that's just a tiny fraction of the rest of the system. From the Sun at the center to the inner fringe of the Oort.
Holy fuck, it took so long. 4 minutes?
Designed for the most inhospitable environments. But it's fascinating to see just how drastic the jump in radiation was as soon as they passed the threshold of this new region of interstellar space. But the EM radiation wasn't the only thing that spiked. The temperature also shot way up, like by tens of thousands of degrees. It turns out that the region beyond the sun's sphere of influence is full of superheated plasma, a sort of wall of fire surrounding our solar system. We always knew that traveling beyond our home star system would be very difficult. It's been almost half a century since the last person walked on the moon. Space is a challenge. Doing things in space takes time. But finding out that our solar system is surrounded by a cage of superheated plasma, that throws a bit of a wrench in things. The question is, how will this intensely irradiated environment affect future missions, unmanned and maybe eventually those crewed by humans? How will the machinery hold up under long periods of exposure to this super hot plasma? Is this radiation more dangerous than forms we're more familiar with? And if so, what new kinds of shielding will have to be developed to protect sensitive scientific instruments?
Check this out.
Even more sensitive human
Check out this
bodies?
proposition the narrator makes.
Well, it would seem that the sun has given us at least part of the answer.
Not yet, I'll tell you when.
Our star keeps the solar system safe by exerting its magnetic force on those that press in from interstellar space. It shields our planet and our neighbors from foreign EM radiation. So, could one possible solution be some kind of mobile EM field? It would have to be pretty strong to keep the stormy interstellar space at bay, but hypothetically it could be done. Of course, that technology is likely decades off at best.
That's exactly the information that we're looking for.
That consists of scientific instruments and more sensitive human bodies. Well, it would seem that the sun has given us at least part of the answer. Our star keeps the solar system safe by exerting its magnetic force on those that press in from interstellar space. It shields our planet and our neighbors from foreign EM radiation. So, could one possible solution be some kind of mobile EM field? It would
mobile electromagnetic field. I'm listening. Thanks, man. Electromagnetic field. Wow. Crazy. Yeah, like a generator. It seems like. See that rotating thing? Seems like that's generating the electromagnetic field. But how fast would it have to spin
at? The sun has
at?
given us at least part of the answer. Our star keeps the solar system safe by exerting its magnetic force on those that.
So the sun creates the electromagnetic field because We can Google. We can search. That'll be the next video. How does the sun create an electromagnetic field? I think it sends energy up and down, like kind of like how magnetic polarity works.
So could
Yeah,
one possible
here we go.
solution be some kind of mobile EM field? It would have to be pretty strong to keep the stormy interstellar space at bay, but hypothetically it could be done. Of course, that technology is likely decades off at best.
Because it's not hot matter. It's plasma. Apparently, plasma. I learned this like yesterday. Apparently, plasma is the fourth state of matter. So it's like it's not like a 90,000 degree liquid. You know what I mean? It's like 90,000 degree ball of energy, waves of energy. Which is why I think it's also not melting the Voyager.
Not to mention the fact that developing a spacecraft that can sustain human life for the multi-thousand-year voyage to the edge of the solar system is a massive undertaking by itself. So, are we trapped in a little cosmic bubble surrounded by an impassable wall of fire?
Exactly.
Those of us alive today will...
Exactly, that question. That's the... This right here.
Impassable wall of fire? Those of us alive today will probably be decades off at best. Not to mention the fact that developing a spacecraft that can sustain human life for the multi-thousand-year voyage to the edge of the solar system is a massive undertaking by itself. So, are we trapped in a little cosmic bubble surrounded by an impassable wall of fire? Those of us alive today will probably never know for sure. There will be many challenges along the way. The most difficult will be the sheer scale of the solar system.
Keep
if
Earth
you'd like
in
to
good
learn
shape,
more about
man.
just how mind-bendingly huge our home system is,
We can't
check out
destroy Earth.
Miniverse on CuriosityStream. It's a really fun trip through a micro-sized version of our solar system, hosted by astronaut Chris
Great
Hadfield
video,
and guest
great
like
video.
Michio Kaku. If you watch my videos, you'll know that I'm a big fan of CuriosityStream. It's an online streaming service with thousands of nonfiction titles from some of the best filmmakers in the game.
Who benefits from the privatization of space? And people are actually trying to make it happen.
This when you sign up for Curiosity.
Well, we really do need to Elon Musk. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking, man.
On May 30th, 2020, SpaceX made history by becoming the first private
Yo, you
company
called
to
it,
launch
homie.
astronauts into
You
space.
fucking
The
called
launch
it.
was a culmination of years of preparation and development, and despite having to postpone the launch due to weather, when the Falcon 9 rocket lifted off the ground that Saturday, it performed admirably, and the two astronauts aboard the crew capsule safely made their way towards the ISS. As groundbreaking as this moment was, it does raise some serious questions about the future of spaceflight and space industry. In this episode, we're going to take a look at past legislation regarding the ownership of space, and how private companies can cooperate with the world's nations to build a brighter future for everyone. Let's start with a little background. In the late 1950s and continuing through the 1960s, the US and the Soviet Union were slugging it out trying to establish superiority in the new realm of outer space. Both superpowers feared the other becoming dominant and placing new types of weapons in Earth orbit, becoming even more dangerous to each other and the rest of the world. After a very tense period of international competition, the US, UK, and the Soviet Union came together and signed what's informally known as the Outer Space Treaty. This
No, it's
document was
great,
the first of
man.
its kind,
Save the
and
civilization.
attempted
We
to
gotta
establish
start.
a basis for
I'm a big
international
fan
space law.
of. We gotta
Today, over 100
have
countries are party to the
space
treaty,
stations.
with
We
over
gotta
20
freaking
more
colonize the
working towards
moon. We
ratification.
gotta.
At its core, the Outer Space Treaty is a non-nuclear agreement.
Alright.
It doesn't prohibit military activities
Yo, I got these
in space,
wireless
nor even the placement
earbuds,
of
man.
conventional weapons,
It's
but it does
improved my
explicitly
streaming
ban the
life
use of
so
weapons
much.
of mass destruction.
I really
it also
appreciate the
stipulates
$5,
that space
homie.
and celestial
That's really
bodies
awesome.
must be free to explore
But check
by
this
all
out, man. I got
nations,
these
and that
fucking
no
earbuds
party may
there.
lay claim to any region of space or celestial body. This is all well and good, but the problem with the Outer Space Treaty
I
is
think it's
that it
called
was
Wicked
drafted back
Audio.
in the 1960s, when our understanding of space was considerably more limited
it's
than it is
improved my life a
today,
lot for
which means
streaming.
much of the language was left fairly ambiguous.
So thank
Fast
you.
forward to
Yo,
more
thanks,
recent
man.
years, and we've learned that asteroids are often
Yeah,
full of
I've been
incredibly
wanting these for
valuable
like 2-3
resources,
years.
and that we might be able to mine them. There are even some reports to suggest a
Bluetooth
particular
wireless,
asteroid
you know.
could be worth upwards of $20 trillion.
Alright,
That's
I'm
one way to
gonna,
get the attention of large corporations and eccentric billionaires
watching.
like
I
Elon
hope
Musk
this is a
and
good
Jeff
video.
Bezos.
I'll be back in a
And
minute.
conveniently,
That's
the
cool.
Outer Space Treaty doesn't explicitly say you can't extract celestial
I'm gonna
resources
keep listening.
as
That's the
long
point
as
of
you
this
don't
whole
claim
thing.
the
I'm gonna
area
keep
from which
listening
you're
as I
extracting them.
as I
But
go there,
just
so I
to be
can probably
safe, the US
take part.
passed the Space Act of
do
2015,
that.
which clarified the country's position on their rights in outer space. The law explicitly allows U.S. citizens and corporations to engage in the commercial exploration and exploitation of space resources, including water and minerals. As some of the world's richest individuals suit up to build their own space resource extraction operations, we should look back to a forgotten episode of the early days of space exploration. Back in the 1960s, a group of underdeveloped nations banded together to form a coalition known as the Group of 77. This group used the strength of their numbers among UN nations to try to influence international space law to prevent it from disproportionately benefiting the world's wealthiest countries. Their goal was a more equitable distribution of profits derived from outer space resources. They believed that space was the common heritage of all humankind, and as such should be utilized to benefit the entire human population, and to help fund underdeveloped nations rather than let extraordinary wealth pile up in the hands of a few powerful countries. The Group of 77 understood the language of the Outer Space Treaty to call for a new economic order that would reduce global poverty and increase the well-being of all nations. The treaty says, the exploration and use of outer space shall be carried out for the benefit and in the interest of all countries, irrespective of their degree of economic or scientific development, and shall be the province of all mankind. In 1970, one delegate to the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space proposed a new legal designation for the final frontier, that of the common heritage of mankind. This was a fairly new idea, originally applied to maritime law just a few years earlier. If space were given this designation, it would lend legal support for the democratic distribution of revenues derived from outer space. In 1973, the group officially called for an amendment to the Outer Space Treaty to include the common heritage language. One delegate neatly summed up the group's position, saying, "It does not seem justifiable that space activities should evolve in a climate of total laissez-faire, which would conceal under the cloak of rationality new ways for an abusive exercise of power by those who exert control over technology." Despite pushback from both the US and the Soviet Union, not to mention a horde of angry businessmen, the final version of the draft did include the common heritage language. In 1979, when the amendment came under
US
ratification,
and
it was met
Russia
with
was
intense
against
opposition,
that, like,
including
common
pushback
heritage
from the Reagan
language.
administration,
Can you believe
and
it?
eventually the group had to abandon it.
Wow.
Another group made a similar attempt in 1988 and was also forced
can't
to
even have
submission. By 1996,
freedom
the
of
United States had
space.
clarified their stance on the benefit clause to mean vague assurances of helping underdeveloped nations build their own space technology. The final word from the UN Outer Space Committee came in 2014, when they put out an article summarizing their recent meeting. Its headline read, "Outer space benefits must not be allowed
That's
to widen
wild
the global
too,
gap
yeah.
between economic, social inequality."
But
for
back
committee
then,
told.
I think
And
the
that
US
that.
was probably
They paid
way
lip service
ahead
to the past efforts of their
technologically
members, but
compared
embraced the
to other
position of
places in the
equal
world,
access
right?
instead
You
of
know,
democratic
like,
accountability and distribution.
now it's kind of maybe.
Returning to today, we're nearing the
I mean,
end of
other
our
than like US and
opportunity to
Russia
ensure
and
space
like
industry is democratically regulated.
England
what
or
we're
whatever,
facing is not just a new
and,
era of
you know,
space exploration.
Germany,
It's
whatever.
essentially the handing of a key to an inaccessible realm to the world's richest people.
But
If
like
smaller
China,
nations and
Singapore.
individuals from around the world speak up now, we could make a real difference here at the beginning of a new era. It's not just national bragging rights that are at stake. It's a political
It's all
and economic
balancing out,
struggle
yeah.
over the very nature of the celestial commons.
Japan,
There are
Japan
two
was
possible
recovering
outcomes.
from 2 fucking
The massive
nuclear bombs on
intensification of
their
inequality,
cities.
or the potential for the elevation of
And
all
they just
people
forgave
and
us.
the movement towards an egalitarian world. If billionaires, and soon-to-be trillionaires like Jeff Bezos, are allowed to transcend even the resource
China's catching
limits
up
of
to
the Earth
economic
and
prosperity.
access
Yeah,
cosmic
exactly,
resources
man.
beyond the reach of the entirety of mankind, they will amass godlike power.
They're a younger,
the sheer
like,
dollar value of
younger
offered
nation in
resources is
terms
simply
of.
unfathomable, and the
They're just
repercussions
young in terms of the
allowing all that
modern
wealth to
China.
flow into the bank accounts of a handful of ultra-wealthy and powerful
So
people
they're
would
still
have
learning all this
disastrous
stuff, but now they
Instead
have a
buying
generation
yachts,
of
football
learning and
teams,
errors,
private islands,
and they would have the
space
infrastructure,
industrialists could
and they
buy
have the numbers
entire
and the
nations.
genius,
This
and the
capitalist
materials.
techno-utopia would look less like Star Trek and more like Altered Carbon, with those who benefit
It's
from
not long
space
and cheap
industry
stuff in labor.
physically separated from
I
the
was
unwashed
I went to
masses
China
and completely above the law and any
2004.
repercussions for
I
their
really liked it.
actions.
Really nice.
Space
People were really
should be
nice there,
considered
man.
the common heritage of all of humanity.
I mean,
Like
politically,
Alaska's sovereign
it's very
wealth fund,
tough, I
which
imagine.
delivers a
but-
percentage of oil revenue to its residents, the same could be done for
And
the
the single
inhabitants of planet
child
Earth.
law that must.
Yes, compensate the
that's
companies
a mess,
involved
man.
in
That
the
messes up
extraction, but
families and
distribute
stuff.
the wealth in a manner
Forced
that reflects a
abortion shit,
democratic
fuck.
vision of outer space. If we choose to
Right.
see the space beyond Earth as an international commons, it would
Right.
give us a fantastic opportunity
Let's
to
find,
experiment
let's
with
find
redistributive
some-
mechanisms beyond
some
the usual
more
confines of
psychedelic
nation
stuff.
states. If we can think
find
big
maybe a
picture and
Terrence
establish a sovereign
McKenna.
wealth fund for the entire Earth, imagine what that could do for our species and the planet. As space resource extraction grows and becomes a more profitable industry, redistribution of the revenue
Why was I in
could
China?
create
Oh,
a
thanks, man.
genuine global universal
I
basic
took
income,
a
freeing citizens the
history
world over
of
from
Hong
crippling
Kong
poverty,
course
elevating developing nations, and
at
furthering
the,
the advancement
Hong
of
Kong
the entire
University.
species. The windfall from space
Dr.
industry.
Stanley Ho, who owns much of Macau, which is the gambling place in. Oh, he passed away. That's so sad. Macau. I think his son went to University of Toronto.
He was one of Hong Kong's original tycoons, one of Asia's richest men. But Stanley Ho made his fortune on the nearby enclave of Macau, the only place in China where
His son went to University of Toronto, I think.
For 4 decades, Ho held the only gaming concession in the territory. The man who came to be known as the godfather of gambling always said he never indulged himself.
I know nothing of gambling. I still don't gamble. I've got the franchise because it was a challenge.
Thank you, Dr. Stanley Ho. Thank you. He endowed a fund. Look at that. He has an astrolabe. Look at that.
Too many trials and are connected with it.
Look at that. Let's pause on that. Yo, Stanley was a baller. Look at him. What a pimp. Thank you, Dr. Stanley Ho. That's cool. I want that in my office. Yo, an astrolabe? Yo, let's find out what astrolabes can do. How did you even make an astrolabe? Like, I would have to think you would need like a CNC lathe. You know what I mean? Yeah, man. I want that in my office. So I went to University of Hong Kong. Yo, let me show you Hong Kong on Google Maps. I also went to Beijing. I spent Monday, flew to Beijing, spent a week, what's it called? A weekend there. Beijing. I saw Beijing. Saw the Great Wall. I saw the Forbidden City. It's amazing. I'm really lucky. So yeah, some of the trip was paid for, and then I paid for other parts. Yeah, man. So Hong Kong is like an island, right? So this is all downtown. We stay right here at the university here on Pak Fu Lam Road. It was awesome, dude. Right here. Wylan Hall. Overlooking the cemetery. I don't know if you've ever seen I don't know if you've ever seen Bruce Lee, Dragon Story, where he goes back to Hong Kong and his father had died. This is the cemetery. And this was the residence. And our window, actually the bathroom window, looked out right onto the cemetery. It was trippy, man. Hey man, if Archimedes can create the Antikythera mechanism. What? Dude, you're dropping some crazy knowledge and words. Awesome, good for you. I'm thinking about SEA. I train martial arts and there's a Muay Thai retreat. Yo, that's sick, man. What an experience. That's awesome, yo. Thanks. Yeah, I'm really lucky. It's really beautiful. Oh, what's this? Like, let's friggin' drop. Like, let's do a human drop here. Wow, nice, perfect. Look at where I dropped it. It's so perfect. Look at that. Wow. Yo, you train martial arts? It's sick, man. Southeast Asia. Wow, man. Yo, I've trained, did we talk about this? I trained karate growing up. I have a first degree black belt in karate. North American style, I guess. And I trained wushu, long fist, northern fist. Yo, get out of here, sensei. Sensei Pig Elephant. Heck yeah, man. Yo, sick, man. Tang Soo Do. I'm gonna Google Tang Soo Do if that's cool. What's Tang Soo Do? Tang, that sounds Chinese. Wushu you're talking about? Or karate? Tang Soo Do. Tang Soo Do. This is an unofficial video, this is a fan video. What's BJJ? It's Taekwondo. Oh. Oh, it's Korean. Awesome, homie.
Another video here on the Modern Ninja channel.
That's cool. Taekwondo and karate, they're pretty. They do differ though, for sure.
Not sure how often it will be. Probably every other week or so.
But they're probably the most similar. Those two. Oh, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, sick, man.
Basically, it breaks down one.
That's awesome.
One type of martial arts for you guys, because if you don't know, there are literally hundreds of styles out there, and it can be hard to keep track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the history of that style and explain what that style is at its core. That way, for those of you that don't,
This is not going to be an official video.
You guys know ahead of time. I suck at punching.
Thanks, Sudo. Right. Taekwondo, traditional Taekwondo. Okay. You have an ego, it'll crush you. Oh, well, BJJ, yeah. I don't know, man. I'm not into the like arm bars and stuff, you know, like it's cool though, man. I like it. It's very true, very truthful, homie. I did wushu. I did. Let me show you. Let me show you a video wushu. Wushu. I can't remember the guy's name. Old school video, man. Oh, the OG video. Long face. Look up Joe Rogan and John Danaher. Okay. Chen Quan. Yeah, Chen Quan, that's it. Or Chang Xuan. What's his name? Yenwen King. Yenwen King. Yeah, I'll check it after. Yo, this guy, this is sick. This is classic, man. This is old though. I mean, today they might be better, but this is really eloquent. That's good. Here we go. I couldn't do the splits. I'll be honest. I couldn't do the what's it called? Whatever that was called. What he did. I can do the kicks. I was good at jumping and I was good at spinning. This is too traditional though. There's better ones out there. Like that's so traditional, just a simple butterfly, you know. I was too traditional. I think this became, his form became like the one to like everyone learned from this. Yeah, this is so traditional though. This is like the based on this, people like went to learn, like became the form to learn. So I think he ends it in a butterfly here. For sure, homie. I'll pull up the John Danaher, Joe Rogan. It's a lot more. It's a lot more impressive in person. I'll be honest. Like, this guy, like he jumps so high there, but it's in a big arena. It's not. You need scale, right? That's why the two-person fight looks so good. The one person, if you're not there, it's like you don't understand the scale. Yemen King, Cheng Xuan.
长拳的比赛套路呢，获得了男子拳。
The butterfly twist. Fucking good.
长拳的比赛套路呢，一共是62个动作。由于刚才这位选手动作没有做完，那么被扣了0.2分。接下来出场的这位选手是0116号中国选手袁文庆。袁文庆今年是23岁，来自中国的山西，当今中国武术王子，24岁，身高1.67米。1988年6月在兆丰杯电视杯全国武术锦标赛上夺得男子10个项目的6枚金牌。10月在杭州举行的国际武术邀请赛上夺得男子刀术、长拳、棍术全能4枚金牌，并获得最佳优秀运动员称号。1989年全国武术锦标赛个人赛中获得了男子全能的冠军，并获男子其他器械第1名。他是继赵长军之后。
Oh. Holy fucking shit.
And we're live. John Donaher, thank you very much, sir. Very nice to see you.
It's my pleasure, Joe. Thank you for having me here.
Nice to be with a fellow fanny pack proponent as well. And now...
Studying kickboxing as a teenager in New Zealand. I came to the United States, and for the first time, there's no wrestling culture in my country. New Zealand has no wrestling culture. It's one of the few countries where there's no indigenous wrestling culture. There were, but it was kind of lost in the sands of time. When I grew up, wrestling was something I saw once every 4 years at the Olympics on TV. And I didn't even associate it with fighting, to be honest with you. I just saw it as this strange sport where two guys tackled each other. And so I came to the United States, and I was working as a bouncer. America has much, much more of a wrestling culture in it.
You are one of the most fascinating characters in the world of jiu-jitsu and the world of martial arts. And for people who are not aware of your background, you started out, correct me if I'm wrong, you started out a philosophy student.
That's correct, yes.
And you were working as a bouncer. And you were jacked, right? You were a power lifter at the time?
Yes.
And you wanted to figure out a way to defend yourself.
It wasn't really a question of wanting to figure out. It was a pretty simple desire that I had. When I grew up in New Zealand, martial arts was almost entirely based around striking prowess. You'll back me up on this, Joe. We're similar age. When we grew up, it's no exaggeration to say that the study of martial arts in English-speaking countries, North America, Western Europe, etc., was absolutely dominated by the striking arts. And what is the system of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Well, it can be described in a few different ways. I'm going to give you one rendition, which is pretty simple and will resonate with most of your listeners. Jiu-Jitsu is a system based around 4 distinct steps. You can add steps, you can subtract steps, but the rendition I'm going to give you now is probably the most widely known. Okay, let's say a friend of yours asks for advice on fighting. He knows you're a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu expert, you're a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he's saying to me, Joe Rogan, tell me, I don't know anything, I want to fight someone else using your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. What are the steps of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? What's the system that what is the system that it espouses? You're going to see always that step number 1 is take your opponent to the ground. Okay? Why? Why do you think the ground is so special? Why did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu choose the ground as step number 1 of its system? Why do you think?
Well, it all came out of judo, right? So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu took the effective submission techniques of judo and then just refined them.
That's the historical reason,
Right.
but what's the mechanical, physical reason?
Because you can control someone on the ground far better, right?
Yeah, you can control people. Lomachenko controls people in the standing position with angle and distance. There's different ways to control people.
Yes, in boxing, if you only are boxing.
But why the ground? Why did they choose the ground? What's the mechanical reason? What happens when you take a human being to the ground?
Well, there's a whole barrier behind them that you can
Leverage?
press them against.
What about if you're in bottom position?
Well, you could use that barrier as leverage.
True. But there's something that occurs.
Oh,
when someone
I didn't
goes
get it
down to the
right,
ground.
but
something big that you're
exactly what
missing.
Joe
What am I
said.
missing?
What's the most explosive event in the Olympic Games? The event that probably requires more transfer of energy and development of kinetic energy than any other. There's a bunch you could name,
100
but
meter.
one of them for me is always going to be the javelin throw. The javelin throw involves a full-powered sprint, a jump, a massive explosive turning of both hips and shoulders, and a throw. All the quintessential explosive elements of the human body are involved in the javelin throw, probably to a greater degree than any other Olympic event.
Yeah.
And as a result, people can throw a javelin 80, 90 meters. What would happen if you took those same javelin throwers and made them perform the same event on their knees?
Wouldn't be so good.
They probably couldn't throw it more than 10 meters. Okay, and what's changed? The closer they get to the ground, the less they can employ explosive force. What's the first thing cowboys do when they go to brand a steer?
Okay, that makes sense. I
Take it
understand
down.
the point he's making now.
They lock up its legs and they put it down on the ground. Nobody tries to brand as standing still. You're going to get killed because it can employ explosive dynamic movement to hurt you. You put them on the ground, dynamic explosive movement is massively curtailed. It takes away the single riskiest element of fighting, which is quick dynamic movement that can generate kinetic energy. So step number 1 of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is get it to the ground. It's inherently safer. Less things can go catastrophically wrong on the ground than in a standing position. What's step number 2?
Secure a dominant position. Control.
Control, too vague. There's many ways to control people. There's a definite step. You've just taken the guy down. What's your first thing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Well, the first thing I would try to do is get to a dominant position.
What do you mean by that? Be more precise.
Okay, pass to side control,
Good. You just answered it right there. Get past his legs.
Past his legs.
Why?
His legs are strong. You carry you around. You could hold a person in position. They're very good defensively.
They're dangerous.
They're dangerous.
Okay, if I end up inside your legs, if you're a skilled jiu-jitsu player, you can arm lock me, you can leg lock me, you can strangle me. Even if you were an untrained fighter, you could upkick me.
Right.
Many a man has been knocked out by an upkick.
Sure.
Even an untutored guy can pull an upkick.
Sure.
Legs are
phenomenal. When
you take the fight to the ground, take away the danger of explosive kinetic energy. Step number 2, get past his dangerous legs. Step number 3, work your way through a hierarchy of pins, each one graded upon your ability to harm your opponent with strikes on the ground, and set up step number 4, submissions. And now the question that needs to be asked: where do leg locks fit into that system?
If we could open up the sun, we'd see layers of dense hydrogen gas, hundreds of thousands of miles deep. And at its center, the core, the sun gives birth to light. Forged in one of the most violent reactions in the universe, nuclear fusion.
The specific nuclear reaction that powers the sun is fusion. Fusion of hydrogen into helium. You take 2 hydrogen atoms, you ram them together, and what's left over is a helium atom.
It sounds simple enough, but it's not.
It's actually hard to get 2 atoms to fuse. 2 protons have the same charge, they're both positively charged, they want to repel each other.
Protons don't like to get close together. They have to come together with a huge amount of energy or velocity to get close enough to begin to fuse, and that's very, very rare.
To force protons together, it takes immense amounts of heat and pressure, generated by the invisible hand of gravity. The sun contains 99.8% of all the matter in the solar system. That's a lot of mass. All that mass pulls the sun together with unimaginable gravitational force.
But with gravity crushing things down, things get close enough together, and nuclear fusion happens.
In this nuclear compactor, hydrogen atoms slam together 100 million quadrillion times each second. Some of these collisions are so powerful that atoms fuse, releasing energy.
When the protons come together, to bind together, they lose a little bit of mass, and that mass gets converted into energy. And every second of every day, about 5 million tons of stuff is being converted to energy. It's amazing.
The Baron in person. What's up, homie? What's going on, Baron Badcock? Welcome, my man. Baron's in the King's Club too. It's just, I just put the donation list up there. You're in the King's Club up there, Baron. How you doing, homie? Welcome, my man. I got a wireless, look. It's wireless headphone finally. After like 2 years I've been eyeballing these headphones. I'm like, I gotta get them.
Creating
nice,
a
yo,
huge
thanks, man.
cosmic explosion.
I got a nice setup here too. I got the mic. I just go like that.
Supernovas are a big,
Learning about
giant,
the universe,
dramatic
man.
end to a star's life.
Dude, apparently there's this like plasma super hot
All stars
friggin'
die,
layer
but
outside of
only
the
the
solar
biggest
system, my man.
go out with a bang.
90,000
For a star to go
degrees.
supernova, we think it has to be at least
Traveling at the near speed of light.
Sorry, man, I don't want to give you nightmares again, Baron.
Can zip through space, smack into our planet's atmosphere, and cause incredible disruptions. And one of the biggest impacts we know of happened during the tail end of the Vietnam War.
I highly recommend these earbuds, man. They're expensive, but
wanted to do so
I've wanted these for 2 years and I just feel so
and
completely free.
decided that the best way to do that
They're called
was to
Wicked.
stop the
Wicked.
flow of war material into North
It
Vietnam.
comes with a wireless
The
charging
decision was
case.
to mine Haiphong Harbor and many of the smaller harbors to the south.
This is Dolores Knip, a space weather scientist and former officer in the U.S. Air Force. She likes digging into dusty archives and uncovered a war mystery that's now connected to a major solar event.
Space weather forecasters had noticed that there was one region on the sun that appeared to be a little more active than anticipated. They kept watching it, and then when it came around in late July of 1972 on the east limb of the sun, it was already large. It did start producing solar flares, producing coronal mass ejections, but at that time we didn't have those words. We didn't really understand the concept of the sun actually throwing mass and magnetic material out. We had a general sense that something like a plasma cloud was coming at us. But our ideas were that, well, okay, it might get here in a couple, 3 days. As a matter of fact, it got here in 14.6 hours. Typically, the solar wind is moving at about 400 kilometers per second, which is supersonic, but very, very tenuous.
Serious?
This
Baron, are you
event in
serious, homie?
1972 traveled
501?
at about 2,800
Yo, Baron, are you
so 7
serious,
times
man?
faster
Thank
than
you
the
so
norm
much,
and
man.
carrying
Dude,
tremendous
Baron,
magnetic
you're
field and mass
the
with it.
best, man.
And when
Put me
that
above
hit
Pink Element. Yo,
our
exactly. I'm going. It's I gotta.
shield
It's a freaking JPEG though,
We
man.
had
I gotta
no
edit it. I'm gonna edit it
idea
on
something could
on the
come
go.
from the sun that
Yo,
fast.
thanks
We
so
were pretty
much,
much
man. Are you kidding me?
And when it hit Earth,
Yo, thanks a lot,
those
man.
sea
I really
mines
appreciate
blew up.
it.
Those sea
super
mines
kind, my
were
man.
what the president was relying on.
You know,
to
you don't.
keep the pressure on
yeah.
in the war. And suddenly,
I hope you
the whole
feel like you don't
minefield
feel
had been
obligated
swept
to donate. You know,
by
but
nature, by the sun.
if you can afford it, if you
by
do
the
that.
sea. That
Love the
created
content,
probably
yo.
one of the largest solar energetic particle
Love you
events
being here,
in
man. This is
recorded
awesome, dude.
history.
Whoops. What am I doing
The
here?
naval observers who were up at the time, it was just past dawn, noted that
Thanks a
there were
lot, man.
half dozen sea mines that blew within 30 seconds.
Thanks so
And
much.
they go, "Ooh,
I'm
we
just
do
finding
that?"
the
It was
file
a
now.
furious time in terms of the Navy records, trying to figure out what had happened.
in these declassified reports, Dolores found just a few lines that had
basically said, yes, in August of 1972, a solar storm swept the sea mines in
Yo,
Haiphong
Baron,
Harbor.
I
And
really
so
appreciate it.
I go,
Thanks so much,
"Oh,
man.
it looks like something
That's
did
super
happen."
kind of you,
So there
man.
were and are many impacts that have not been adequately described, and they're just now starting to come to light.
Our sun is a huge ball of magnetized gas and plasma, and its activity goes through a
Shade.
roughly
Oh,
11-year cycle.
I guess you can't see my editing.
We know whether
I'm
we're
editing
in a
the
solar
file right now.
maximum or solar minimum by counting the number of sunspots on the surface. These spots are indicators for giant eruptions, like solar flares, which are sudden outbursts of energy, and coronal mass ejections, which
Yo,
are even
the hot
larger but slower
dog.
eruptions from the sun's
Really
corona.
dreams.
They can increase during the sun's cycle, but luckily
Yeah, I
we
think
have
Neat
some
Dreams
built-in
rated when I was
protection.
sleeping
We
once. I
can
guess I was
think
sleeping when he
of
rated.
Earth's magnetic
I guess you
field
came
as being
when I
kind
was
of a
sleeping.
magnetic
That was
cocoon
jokes.
that keeps most of the solar wind's magnetic field and the plasma outside of Earth's atmosphere. But when the sun decides to launch a really big ejection, sometimes the magnetic field has to deform so dramatically that currents are generated, and those currents can actually flow along the magnetic field lines down to Earth's surface. And that's one of our biggest
I saw that. Haha, it was
concerns,
hilarious.
because if those
Yo.
extra currents are flowing in the
That
ground,
that was pretty
they're always
funny though.
looking
I
for
saw the
pathways
stream
of
afterwards. I'm like, oh my
And
god.
when they find a path along a long conducting pipe,
That's funny, man.
or in older times,
I'm editing
telegraph wires, or
the
now
photo
in our
right
power
now.
grid, they will take that path. We're starting to understand that these are not once-in-a-century events. These probably occur more often than we think. We're in solar
501.
minimum now. We're kind of
Dude, that's
relaxed,
awesome.
You know, but the next solar maximum is kind of forecast
That's
to be
awesome.
not too spectacular. But the August 72 event came out of small sunspot cycles. So
That's
we
jokes.
can't just take the sunspot count as the, oh, we don't have to worry about it situation.
It's like the
We
Price is Right
actually
when you
have to
bet
be
like $1,
monitoring the sun 24/7.
or when your bet's like
Today at NOAA's Space Weather
right, like
Prediction
like
Center,
someone
we
bets
have more
1,000,
eyes
you
on
bet
the
like
sun
1,001.
and better models to help us predict space weather, which is
It's affecting our
I gotta line it up
magnetosphere.
properly, though.
It's creating the aurora. It's also energizing
go.
particles and creating radiation
That looks
environment
about
that
right.
can affect satellites. It affects the ionosphere in those regions, and that impacts
hilarious, LOL.
airlines that have flights
Yo, thanks so much,
from
man.
New York to Beijing. There are
Hope you
several
feel
things
like
that
you
are
don't
really
feel
important
obligated
for
to, you
conducting
know?
space weather operations.
But man,
the
I
first
appreciate
are
it.
satellites, which serve as sentinels.
And yeah,
from
dude,
the
I'm
abyss.
saving up, man.
The
I'm
GOES
saving
satellites
up
give you
my
the
money.
daily weather that you
The
see
money.
on the news at night. But
know, I'm
in
being
addition,
smart with it.
the space weather observations consist of monitoring the energetic particles in Earth's radiation belt at geosynchronous orbit. They also monitor the Earth's magnetic field and its variations.
Sorry, man, I'm just
There's
about done
solar
editing it.
observations that are looking at the sun in X-rays and extreme ultraviolet to give us information about activity on the sun.
Activity like coronal mass ejections and solar flares, which have different lead times.
How's that? Was
once
that
they erupt.
automatically updated,
We
or I gotta
classify
reload it?
solar flares here, starting with what we call
I gotta
A,
reload it.
and then we have B
Maybe
level,
not. Baron Badcock,
then
here we go.
C level, and then M's,
Aw,
and then
yeah.
X's. And each one of those categories is 10 times more
Baller.
The 1972 event that blew up a bunch of sea mines were connected to X-class flares.
We have instruments measuring the intensity of the solar radiation.
It updated,
It
yo.
appears
Thanks,
very
man. Thanks
quickly
so
in
much.
near real time.
You kidding me? I appreciate it so much.
And then they can use that information to provide their warnings and alerts. The other type of major events is coronal mass ejections, moving much slower. Right now, we're using coronagraphs that are on NASA's satellite. It takes as short as maybe 14 hours.
Yo, you're
just
a
for
boss.
very
You're a real
fast
boss,
but it can
Baron.
take
Appreciate it
more
big
normally
time, man.
several days to reach us.
Yeah, man. I'm saving up
We have
my
a little
money
bit more
big
lead
time.
to say something about how fast is it moving.
Kidding me?
when
Look
do
at
we
that. I
expect
feel
it
so
to
honored. I
land,
feel so
How
blessed.
long do we expect it to land?
Appreciate that, man.
We've
Thank
got
you.
another satellite that's entirely
You know,
outside
thanks a lot.
of Earth's magnetosphere at a location between
All right, let's check out
Earth and
this
the
wall of
Sun,
fire.
called the Lagrange point, L1. And that's a stable place where both the gravity and the centrifugal force of the satellite balance out the Earth's gravitational force. And so it's always there as a buoy upstream to give us a warning of what's coming at Earth.
Another key piece of their operations are models, which are constantly evolving to improve predictions.
The Wang-Shili RGN model showed
This episode of Real Engineering is brought to you by Shopify, my trusted partner for merch
We watched
sales.
this yesterday, right? I want to find the real scientific possibility of us transversing
On July
the.
19th, 2012, the Solar Dynamics Observatory
Yeah, we saw this
captured
yesterday.
this incredible footage of the sun.
But this is a real video.
This clip was recorded with one frame every 12 seconds, meaning every second of this video represents 6
Fuck.
minutes of real time. This event began with an intense solar flare, a sudden release of magnetic energy sending ungodly amounts of energy in the form of radiation and light into space. This particular solar flare was followed by a coronal mass ejection, a massive twisted bubble-shaped eruption firing a colossal cloud of electrically charged particles into space, which can disrupt interplanetary magnetic fields and interact with Earth's magnetic field in what is known as a geomagnetic storm. Finally, as the solar storm subsided and the eruption bubble began to cool, we were treated to one of the most mesmerizing events in our solar system, coronal rain, where the remaining charged plasma cools and falls back to the surface of the sun, forming these beautiful cage-like structures as the particles follow the sun's magnetic field lines back down.
How you doing, Baron?
An astoundingly beautiful
What's new
event.
with you, man?
But had it happened just a week earlier, the flare would have been pointing squarely at Earth. And it wouldn't have been the first time a solar storm affected life negatively on Earth. In 1859, a similarly powerful solar flare, called the Carrington event, did hit Earth, treating people as far south as the Caribbean to the Northern Lights, while also knocking out major telegraph systems in both Europe and North America. In some cases, the geomagnetic disturbances were so strong that they sparked fires,
the pink
shocked
elephant's
telegraph
back.
operators, and
Heck
even
yeah.
allowed the telegraph system to work with no power. In 1989,
Yo.
a large geomagnetic storm caused a blackout
Welcome,
in Quebec
welcome.
after the coronal mass ejection managed to trip circuit breakers in their grid, leaving 6 million people without power for 9 hours. So clearly, these storms have the power to really mess with vital technologies that keep our society moving. But how exactly do they do it?
No,
To understand this, we first need to
I'm not
understand
talking
some basics of how
Yo,
electricity is
man.
generated in our power stations. As you probably know already,
It's
we generate
all
electricity
are
by moving
equal.
a
Who's
wire
beer and
through a
bad
magnetic
cock?
field, or vice versa. The basic law behind this is called
We're all-
Faraday's
we're all
law,
equal, man.
which states that any change
Nice
to a
one.
magnetic field surrounding a
Yo,
coil of
thanks,
wire
guys.
will cause an
I'm so
electromotive
blessed,
force
man.
to be produced, otherwise known as a voltage. The voltage can be considered
Honestly.
the force pushing the electrons through a wire. If they are free to move,
I'm
a
honored.
current will be produced. The current is a measure of the
I really
rate of
appreciate
flow
it.
of electrons. We generally generate electricity by rotating a coil of wire inside a magnetic field. We do it this way simply because rotational motion is efficient with no changing of direction, like linear motion forcing us to decelerate and lose inertia. But we can generate currents other ways, like dropping a magnet.
Okay, I'm gonna
through
give
a
you
coil of
502 when I
wire.
stop
This
being
moves the
poor.
magnetic
No,
field
man.
itself rather than
No
the coil
worries,
of
man.
wire.
Don't feel obligated,
So,
dudes.
stationary wires can
For
generate
sure,
currents when a magnetic field
know.
changes around them. And our electricity
appreciate
grid
it, guys.
happens to be made up of millions of kilometers of stationary wire.
time.
We have effectively turned the planet into a massive electric generator by surrounding the Earth's magnetic core with all this conductive wire. The only thing that's missing is a large shift in the Earth's magnetic field. Unfortunately for us, that is exactly what coronal mass ejections do to Earth's magnetic field. On March 10th, 1989, the sun blasted a cloud of charged particles so large that it dwarfed our planet in
dive,
size.
yeah.
It raced through space at 450 kilometers per second
I'm gonna go
before
back.
crashing into the Earth's magnetopause,
When,
the boundary between Earth's magnetosphere
was this?
and rather than the coil of wire. Our electricity grid
But,
happens
what
to
was
be
I gonna
made
say?
up of millions
What's up
of
with you guys? How you
kilometers
guys
of
doing?
stationary wire.
Oh,
We have
I
effectively
was
turned
looking
the
at
planet into a massive
the
electric
4
generator
steps
by
of the
surrounding
judo
the Earth's magnetic
pink
core
elephant
with all this
that
conductive
Dan
wire. The only
podcast
thing
we're
that's
talking
missing
about.
is a large shift in the Earth's
I was
magnetic
watching it
field.
on here.
Unfortunately for us, that is exactly what coronal mass ejections do to Earth's
John
magnetic
Danaher.
field. On March 10th, 1989, the sun blasted a cloud of charged particles so large that it dwarfed
I
our
missed that
planet
again.
in
Let's
size.
go back there again.
It raced through space at 450 kilometers per second before crashing into a wire. We have effectively turned the planet into a massive electric generator by surrounding the Earth's magnetic core with all this conductive wire. The only thing that's missing is a large shift in the Earth's magnetic field. Unfortunately for us, that is exactly what coronal mass ejections do to Earth's magnetic field. On March 10th, 1989, the sun blasted a cloud of charged particles so large that it dwarfed our planet in size. It raced through space at 450 kilometers per second before crashing into the Earth's magnetopause, the boundary between
Yo,
Earth's
Baron,
magnetosphere
that's so sick.
and interplanetary space,
Heck yeah.
sitting about
The
65,000
haze.
kilometers above Earth. It struck with such force that it
The haze
literally
plant's
shook
so
and
good.
trembled our planet's protective magnetic
I've had amnesia
field.
haze before.
The first phase of
It's
this
really
is
good. I've
called
had
the
haze,
sudden
pure haze.
storm commencement, where the
Pure
coronal
haze
mass
is, it's, you know,
ejection first arrives
okay.
at our
But
magnetopause,
it's
causing the
sativa, please sativa.
magnetosphere to compress on the daylight side of the Earth, resulting in a sudden increase in the intensity of the geomagnetic field in that region. The next phase results in a decrease in intensity as an electric current induced in the magnetosphere and ionosphere pushes the boundary of the magnetosphere outwards and results in a decrease in the geomagnetic field. And the geomagnetic field can continue to vary from hours to days after this initial burst. So, these geomagnetic storms cause shifts in the Earth's magnetic field, which drives induced electric currents in anything capable of carrying them. That can be the ground, ocean, or our electricity grid.
Oh.
If those currents enter our grid, they can wreak havoc on essential infrastructure. So it seems like a disaster is waiting to happen. What are we doing to prepare for the worst? Unsurprisingly, one of the largest industries on Earth has thought pretty hard about this problem and has set out guidelines on how to deal with such an event. As mentioned in my recent solar sailing video, we currently have several satellites parked in Lagrange Point 1, a point between the Sun and the Earth where a satellite can maintain a constant position, and thus allow us to receive advanced warning of any coronal mass ejection. This point confused many commenters who assumed solar flares were simply bursts of radiation travelling at the speed of light, and thus no speed of light communication method could give us advance warning. But these eruptions of particles travel at a fraction of the speed of light, about 0.15% the speed of light for our above 1989 event, and thus can provide up to an hour of warning time. We also have some less definitive warning signs that the Sun may point to coronal mass ejection in our direction by observing sunspots, which are dips in brightness on the surface of the Sun, which occur as magnetic energy bottles up in the solar atmosphere before being suddenly released. These sunspots come in cycles of low and high activity every 11 years. This warning time can provide grid operators a little time to prepare for any anomalies, but they are more useful for GPS satellites whose accuracy is affected by ionosphere disturbances as their radio waves refract through it, and thus need to adjust their signal to compensate for it. In severe solar storms, these warnings would give industries where GPS malfunction could lead to loss of life, like airliners, vital time to prepare. To protect our grid, it's really a matter of designing it in a way to be able to deal with these induced currents. Let's
Imagine
take a
being
deeper
on
look
a
into that 1989
plane.
blackout to see
Oh,
what
be
really happened and
fucked.
see how grid operators can prepare. The first malfunction occurred as a result of transformers becoming saturated. Power transformers are placed at intervals between high voltage transmission lines and power generators or local distribution lines to step up or step down voltages. So what does saturation mean? Transformers work by winding wire from the source around a ferromagnetic core. This generates a magnetic field inside the core, which can in turn induce an electric current in our secondary winding. If our primary wire has more windings than the secondary wire, it will step down the voltage. And if the secondary wire has more windings than the primary wire, it will step up the voltage. These transformers form an essential part of our grid, but when the core becomes saturated, it interferes with their operation. Saturation just means that the magnetic core has reached its maximum magnetic flux capabilities. So an increase in current and voltage will not result in a subsequent increase of magnetic flux. If this happens, the voltage induced in the secondary winding can no longer match the waveform as the voltage powering the primary coil. So the waveform of the secondary wire becomes distorted. When this happened in Quebec, the grid voltage became unstable, causing the protective relays to disconnect 5 high voltage transmission lines, including one from a hydroelectric facility. As the hydroelectric facility was disconnected, it experienced a rapid loss of load, meaning its power had nowhere to go, which caused the voltage to suddenly increase, which damaged 2 step-up transformers as a result of excessive heating. Saturated transformers are the root cause of most grid malfunctions during magnetic storms. However, in 1989, the knock-on effect of these waveform distortions is what caused the majority of the damage, as electromechanical protective relays tripped and cut off sections of the grid. Electromechanical relays are essentially switches that turn on and off when electric current flows in the control circuit, creating a magnetic field in an electromagnet and pulls an armature down to complete a circuit in a secondary circuit. These can be combined to form logic gates that are more complicated but are in general not programmable to deal with anomalies like distorted waveforms caused by transformer saturation. Today, we have much smarter microprocessor technology that can be programmed to deal with these issues better and maintain grid stability, but because of the electromechanical relay's reliability and long service life, there are still thousands of these older devices in the grid infrastructure, but they are slowly being phased out for more modern technology, especially in northern and southern regions more susceptible to geomagnetically induced currents. We can also block geomagnetically induced currents because they are direct currents, where our normal power is alternating current. Capacitors can only transmit alternating current because capacitors don't physically complete circuits. They are just large stores of positive and negative potentials that switch every time the current flips. DC currents don't flip, and thus capacitors do not allow DC currents to flow. So we do have options to minimize the effects of these disturbances. I expected this to be a dramatic video that would drag viewers in on the fear of their grid failing from solar flares. You can probably tell from the shift in tone from the start of the video to the end. As I researched this topic more thoroughly, it really seems like mainstream media's fearmongering on the effects of solar storms on our electricity grid is completely overblown. With only one notable blackout caused by geomagnetically induced currents that with today's technology was completely preventable, there isn't much evidence that grid operators need to spend vast amounts of money on these systems. Although DC blocking capacitor systems have been installed in countries in northern locations more at risk of geomagnetic disturbances like Finland and England. In the end, the only reason electricity grid operators have not implemented these DC blocking devices and other mitigating technologies is because they would cost more to model and implement than the risk geomagnetic disturbances actually pose to the grid. In reality, the risk from hurricanes and other terrestrial weather events pose a much bigger risk to our electricity grid. The electricity grid makes the internet possible, and the internet has changed the world in almost every way possible, including allowing people to start and run entire businesses without ever leaving their homes, reaching customers all over the world. I am able to sell my graph paper notebooks, t-shirts, and pins with the help of Shopify, who have all the tools you need to set up an online store. If you want to start your own online selling business, Shopify is the perfect place to start. It has logo generators, plug-and-play themes so you can make your page look professional with zero coding experience, has the tools to organize ad campaigns and analytics to analyze your success. It was crazy to see my analytics spike last month when I announced the graph paper notebook with over 2,000 sold so far and only a fraction.
Yo, I like electronic music, I like drum and bass, I like jungle, I like trance.
Sending a spacecraft to explore far-off places in the solar system is cool, but you know what's even cooler? Sending spacecrafts to explore outside the solar system. It's new terrain for human-made objects, and we've only done it twice, but in a series of papers published this week in the journal Nature Astronomy, scientists shared the first results from Voyager 2, the second spacecraft to break out of the solar system, so we're starting to learn more about what's out there. In 1977, NASA launched the twin Voyager spacecrafts on a daring mission to explore the outer solar system. Both flew by Jupiter and Saturn a few years later, but then, as Voyager 2 headed for Uranus and Neptune, Voyager 1 veered away from the planets and toward interstellar space. Back in 2012, it became the first artificial object to cross the heliopause. That's the boundary where the sun's solar wind plows into the gas and dust of interstellar space. It's on the order of hundreds of thousands of kilometers thick, and it's one way astronomers define the edge of the solar system. Voyager 1 made all sorts of measurements about what that boundary area was like, but it was hard for scientists to figure out how much those measurements said about the entire heliopause as opposed to that one spot where it crossed. That's what made it such a big deal when NASA announced last November that Voyager 2 had also reached the heliopause. Now, a year later, researchers have started to compare what the two Voyagers saw. Voyager 2 has been able to collect even more data than its sibling because its instruments are in better condition. The new data tells us that both missions crossed the heliopause at about the same distance, just over 18 billion kilometers for Voyager 1 and just under that for Voyager 2. That's an important data point because scientists debate how spherical the heliosphere or area of the sun's influence is. At least at these two locations, it seems pretty symmetric. But Voyager 2 found the boundary layer at the heliopause to be much thinner. That might be because the sun's activity is currently near a minimum compared to the solar maximum that happened around the time Voyager 1 flew through. So maybe there was less of a buffer between the solar system and interstellar space when the second probe passed through. Or maybe it suggests something more fundamental about the structure of the heliopause. After all, the two probes did spot some differences that aren't easily explained by the sun's activity. Like Voyager 1 found patches where plasma from interstellar space was leaking through, something Voyager 2 didn't see at all. It turns out two data points is a heck of a lot better than one, but also still not that many. To really understand what's going on, we need more spacecraft to study different locations. But that's a 40-year journey, so I like Muse, in the meantime, let's look out past Voyager to a record-setting black hole. Most common black holes astronomers find are usually 5 to 15 times more massive than the sun, while so-called supermassive ones can be literally billions of times more massive than that. But those aren't the only black holes out there. Physics suggests that stellar mass black holes can be as little as half the size.
I'm probably gonna get up, use the bathroom, talk to my parents just for a second, and then come back. And then I'm gonna have to leave
and if they're not feasting on anything, black holes emit basically nothing, hence the whole black part. So a paper published last week in the journal Science suggests a new way of finding these little rocks. And as is often the case with black holes, scientists went looking for their effect on stuff around them. See, many stars in the galaxy are binary, meaning they're paired with another object and orbit a shared center of mass. If their orbit is aligned just right, we can see these stars move toward and away from the Earth as they circle that center of mass. That forward and backward motion causes their light to alternate between a little too red and a little too blue as their light waves get stretched and compressed. If they know the mass of the big star and the time it takes to orbit, astronomers can work out how much the second object must weigh. Then it's time to pull out the telescope. If the second object should weigh as much as a star, but there's no star in sight, there's a good chance it's a black hole. Astronomers in this recent study went through an archive of old observations looking for giant stars that seem to be changing color in this predictable pattern. Then they narrowed down the search to stars that seem to be orbiting invisible companions, and they discovered what may be the smallest known black hole. It most likely weighs just 3.3 times the mass of the sun, and it could be as little as 2.6 times the mass of the sun. If so, that would put it at just a hair over the theoretical limit of around 2.5. Basically, it's just a little baby black hole. It is more massive than our entire solar system, but still, even better, the method scientists used to make this discovery gives us a whole new way to look for tiny black holes in our galaxy. Now, when I said a record-setting black hole, you probably didn't think I meant the tiniest ever, and I'm sure I'll be back soon with more of the biggest, baddest
Alright. Yeah, I'm gonna use wash. I'm gonna talk to my parents, and then I'm gonna I'll be back in a minute or two, maybe 5.
The sounds of interstellar space, presented by science at NASA.
Maybe less, maybe 4.
Sci-fi movies are sometimes criticized when explosions in the void make noise. As the old saying goes, in space, no one can hear you scream. Without air, there is no sound. But if that's true, what was space physicist Don Gurnett talking about last month? Instrument on Voyager 1 explained where lies ionized gas or plasma that Voyager travels through. No human ear could hear these plasma waves. Nevertheless, because they occur at audio frequencies between a few hundred and a few thousand hertz,
The world as we know it is about to end. The world as we know it is about to end. David Icke.
Thank you. The greatest form of control is where you think you're
you go through them into the advisors. The people that we think are in power, they're only for public consumption. They're here today, gone tomorrow people in all the areas of institutions and politics, and another bunch will come along tomorrow, years ago, around that period and later, and the Islamic jinn. Because the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And this is called the genetic disc. It was found in Colombia. It is estimated to be at least 6,000 years old. And on it are depicted human sperm, human female eggs, the birth process, the whole shebang, fetuses. They knew that far back about all this stuff. Because in ancient society there were high levels of awareness, not least because of these entities, but also in the pre-cataclysmic societies, and that got lost when the cataclysms brought an end to that and people went back to basically a primitive society would actually build up again. And of course, when you talk about the so-called fall of man, it's all connected to this, the fall into a lower state of consciousness, I would suggest, then reptilian snakes seem to be involved in that. And what is also described is the genetic manipulation of the human form. Again, some people have kind of decoded this or expressed this as these entities created humans. Bollocks. No, what they did was change what already existed. It's absolutely in line with what the Gnostics talk about in terms of this archontic force. They changed what already existed. And they manipulated human genetics so we interacted with reality in a completely different way and became much more suppressed in terms of our ability to perceive reality. We no longer were the connected people of before, and we got put in these bubbles of sense of reality, which has held us in servitude ever since. If you have harmony in the waveform level, then that will play through as harmony in the holographic world of the conscious mind. If you have a massive distortion in that level, it will play through as massive distortions in the holographic world of the conscious mind. A world now of war, people dying of hunger in a world of plenty, about me, conflict on all bloody levels. All this came through from this distortion. They're all expressions of this distortion. And it allowed these entities from just outside of human perception, in frequency terms, to manipulate these, this reality that we experience as the world. And they are the force, this is absolutely crucial as we go along, these entities, and that which is an expression of these entities, are all worshipped in the end by all the major religions. People like that who follow one, but all the major religions, I'll come into that as we go along. The secret societies, which are compartmentalized, they, at the highest inner core level, know that what these secret societies are worshipping are these entities, and Satanism, in its own enclosed secrecy, openly worships these entities and sacrifices people to these entities. This is what sacrifice to the gods is all about in the ancient world. This. And behind the institutions of banking and politics, media, religion, and all of it, are these entities through particular bloodlines that I will talk about in a second, which in the end all come back to the same force. Now, you've got to see a lot of these, because if something is a force operating through all these different areas of society, ancient and modern, then the same themes are going to come through all those different things. And they do, as I'll show very clearly as we go through in this section. Common themes, here's one, worship of the reptile. It's in our face if you look at it. The oldest known, this is mainstream anthropology and stuff, the oldest known focus of religious worship is the serpent or the snake. It goes back at least 70,000 years to the Slido Hills in Botswana, where the San people, also known as the Bushmen, say that the great python with his bag of eggs came and created humanity. There's so much symbolism to do with this stuff around the world. And this is a man called the Reverend Bathurst Dean. Obviously, he was a Christian, and he wrote a book called Worship of the Serpent, came out in 1933, and basically he did a study of worship of the serpent all over the world, and why and where it went. And this was his conclusion. It appears then that no nations were so geographically remote or so religiously discordant, but that one and only one superstitious characteristic was common to all, that the most civilized and the most barbarous bowed down with the same devotion to the same engrossing deity, and that this deity either was or was represented by the same sacred serpent. It appears also that in most, if not all, the civilized countries where the serpent was worshipped, some fable or tradition which involved his history directly or indirectly alluded to the fall of man in paradise in which the serpent was concerned. What follows then, but that the most ancient account respecting the cause and nature of this seduction must be the one from which all the rest are derived, which represent the victorious serpent, victorious over man in a state of innocence, and subduing his soul in a state of sin, as he would say as a Christian, into his most abject veneration and adoration of himself. And you find reptilian entities depicted all around the world, like these are found in graves of the Ubaid people, which preceded Sumer in what is now Iraq, Mesopotamia. The Egyptians used to depict their pharaohs in the way of the cobra, with the cobra hood, the cobra belly, the cobra coming out of the third eye. The Druids used to worship a serpent god called Hu, which if you play it through, Hu-Man, it makes sense, symbolically at least. In Asia they had the Nagas, who was said to be a people who could take either human or reptilian form. You had Kukulkan, who was the serpent-focused god of the Mayan people in Central America. Of course, you've got the dragon all over Asia. You've got folk tales galore about dragons and flying dragons. And you've got the folklore and the fairy tales of princes turning from frogs into princes and stuff like that. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the Paul VI audience hall in the bloody Vatican. There's old Ben. What the bloody hell is that, right? It's supposed to be... It's called the resurrection. It's supposed to be Jesus being resurrected. Bloody changed since I last saw a picture. Not that they know what he looked like anyway. It didn't exist, but there you go. But so here then you have the way that the ancients in Mesopotamia and Babylon and such like, they represented the serpent, not the fish gods rather, with the scales, fish god worship. And the priests of the fish god cult, like the Dagon fish god, etc., they used to wear hats like this that looked like a fish head. And I'm saying, as I've said in my books over the years, these ancient religions came through is the Roman Church and Christianity and other things. They're just the same ancient religions using different names to hide the fact that they're the same ancient religions. So there's the fish god cult of Babylon, and there's the Roman Church. Old Ben. And there's the Archbishop of Canterbury with his fish hat. You know, marrying the royal couple. It's just the same thing coming through the ages. They hide it. I'll have a pound of cod, please, Pope. And some chips. There you go. There's your chips. No. Oh, think of the sponsorship potential, Ben. So, this is a great friend of mine, Credo Muchwa. He's in his 90s now, from South Africa. I met him in 1998 when he called me and said, "How do you know about the Chitauri?" What the hell's the Chitauri? The children of the serpent. It's the Zulu ancient lore and legends of the Chitauri, reptilian entities manipulating human affairs. This is one species, because there are many of these reptilian entities, which Credo painted, because he's he's an artist and a great talented man. Interestingly, when you put that next to Robert Ilomis's painting from 2009, and that's much older, in a totally different society, the similarities are compelling. And this is the the necklace of the mysteries. It's been stolen now, unfortunately, but I've seen it many times before it was. Credo Mutua had this passed down as in the shamanistic stream. It's mentioned in accounts 500 years old. He reckons it's at least 1,000. And here you have the symbols hanging from, it's not a necklace really, it goes on the shoulder, it's extremely heavy. And the shaman goes around these symbols and tells the story of African history and indeed world history. And on the front is a very non-human entity with in come and get me mode. And here is a human woman. And this, hundreds at least years of old artifact, that symbol is about the interbreeding between the non-human race and humans to create this hybrid bloodline. And there's more symbols on there which I'll come to later. And I asked him, I said, well, it doesn't look very reptilian. And he told a story that I found around the world in different cultures, that this reptilian force, this Chitahuri as they call them, said, you never depict us as we really look. So some people did, but many people didn't. They just depicted them as completely unhuman, but not like they really looked. Now, this is a big-time important thing in relation to the world that we live in today and what controls it, who controls it. Because the ancient accounts, again, talk, and I've talked to people on the inside in the modern world who've confirmed all this from their perspective, that certain bloodlines were created to specifically represent these entities outside of human society, outside of human frequency range, in the human frequency range of visible light, to be the manipulators in our world of that which is manipulating our world. Because for vibrational and atmospheric reasons, they cannot come into our world except very briefly, or in technology which gives them a manufactured atmosphere, a manufactured reality in which they can come. In other words, they need representatives that are operating within visible light.
Yo, I'm back. Thank you for your patience. Sorry for taking so long. 6:30.
And
I was like 20 minutes. Sorry, guys.
As a software program, they know what it is. They know the body's a biological computer, and they want to keep certain information patterns within this DNA because it
the bear and Damon, I appreciate it, homie.
Bloodlines, and they want to control them as much as they control anyone else.
Thanks, man. I hope this was interesting for the last 3 minutes.
To keep this
I had to. I stood my parents up for 10 minutes. When he donated, I had to go talk to my parents and eat dinner with them.
These bloodlines through the ages,
so you donate them, like, no, I'm going to stay. They understood.
Have interbred incessantly with each other.
Both y'all.
Because if they bred outside of this particular hybrid
You're both homies,
software, it would quickly become diluted.
What do you guys want to watch?
No longer have the information patterns that dictate their behavior, which I'll come to.
This looks
in fact,
interesting,
I'll come to it now. One of the great traits of these bloodlines is that they have deleted from them the ability for empathy.
We got
Empathy
alien
is
emotes.
the fail-safe mechanism of human society, or any society. If we have empathy with the consequences for others of our actions, that fundamentally dictates our actions and suppresses the extreme nature of our actions. If you have no ability to empathize with the consequences for others of your actions, there are now no limits. There is nothing you wouldn't do because there is no emotional consequence of doing it.
Remix.
Indeed, you can get off on it. Some of these do.
All right, let's do it.
And these, in the modern world, are what those bloodlines look like today. They've come through history, and now they're the ones in the positions of power in banking, business, media ownership, politics, corporate, massive corporate giants around the world in big biotech, big pharma, big food, and all the rest
Talking about reptilians, are you serious?
And they are the representatives within visible light of these archontic, I will call them because they take various forms, entities.
Are you serious?
And
jokes.
They are shapeshifters, or the most extreme of them can be. Not all
you
of
can't
them
be serious.
This
is what I left it on.
Extreme of them can be. And people say that Ike is another
it's just
one
Russian.
Look
at this. It's Russian.
Or that's ridiculous. Well,
Czech or
if you're
Turkish,
coming
whatever
from
this
your
is.
perspective
Czech.
of reality that everything is solid,
See?
that is bloody ridiculous. But as I talked about in part one,
It's a Saturn.
this is not a solid world. It's a holographic world. the solidity is illusory, as quantum physics will confirm.
A shapeshifter?
And the shift in shape is not a physical.
This is really good, man. I kind of want to. I'll play the meme.
Information waveform information field.
Dude.
So, if there's a shift in the information field at the waveform level,
what is he talking
then
about?
it will be decoded through the genetic brain decoding system through to a holographic shift. In other words, the shift takes place in the observer's decoding system. 1 minute the person is looking human.
I don't know how much longer I can.
That is decoding the human field.
He needs to start showing some real evidence. Otherwise, I'm not going to watch
not
much
human will become
more.
the dominant one. That decoding system is now decoding the second field. To the observer, there has been a physical shift from human to non-human and back again, but what there's actually been is a shift in the information fields the observer is decoding. And thus, we see people, he's not there by accident either, we see these people here with invisible light, and they look human. But if you could see beyond it, deeper into the energy field, you would see something that's anything but human. And these Gnostic writings found at Nag Hammadi talk about the fact that one of the great ways that these archontic entities manipulate human society and human perception is by being mind
You don't have to
parasites,
do what we say
by
LOL
what
to
we
your
call
stream.
possessing or influencing the human mind to
I saw a
think, perceive,
shapeshifter
and
once.
act in certain
Are you
negative
serious?
ways. So,
how'd you know it was a shapeshifter?
one of the key reasons that these particular bloodlines were created
No, I want to hear. I want to hear the music. I want to play it over it.
Compatibility
I just
here
got.
in the holographic realm.
I just want to hear
When you go
shapeshifter.
back
I'm like,
to the base construct, the vibrational realm, you have vibrational compatibility, or much greater, and therefore the ability to possess that body-mind and influence it and dictate its perceptions and behavior becomes much more powerful than the general run of the human population, in which that genetic compatibility is not as close. Of course, possession is an ancient, as long as history, theme, right up to the present day. Now, talk to a lot of visual psychics around the world. I mean, I've been on this road nearly a quarter of a century. I've had a chance to talk to a few. And they often tell me about seeing ethereal type entities, often reptilian in form, locking into these lower two chakra points and kind of floating around. This is part of the way that they possess. And then I'm reading an article about this visual psychic, Swiss bloke, who seems to be very renowned at what he does. But he wasn't talking about any of this stuff. He was just talking about his life and what he experienced and things that he's experienced. And in the middle of this article, he said this. A guy called Anton Steiger. When I see people in business or politics who are particularly trapped by the material world, five senses, for example, I notice that they no longer have any light bodies at all. In many of these people, the point of light at the heart chakra, which is otherwise always present, is no longer visible to me. What do we call these people like bankers? They are heartless. Literally true on an energetic level.
What did you do?
Instead, I see something like a layer of
summer
shiny
school, really
tar
hot.
around them, in which a
Principal was
monstrous
hot to me,
being
face
in the
face, and her
shape of
face
a
got all
lizard can be
green,
distinguished.
and then purple.
When such people speak on television,
Certainly
for example, I see
hallucination
a
'cause it was hot.
crocodile shape manifesting
Whoa.
itself around the person like in a concave mirror. I don't see the light
That's
of their
crazy,
throat
man.
or forehead chakra. This is the possession, this is the mind parasite nature of these entities that
The only thing I've seen is a therapist once was doing like a meditation with me after my head injury, and I saw her hands had like red balls of like energy. Her hands wasn't like on me or facing me; they were just like sitting like in her lap. But I could see her hands had balls of like red energy, like light. It was like a red bright light in her hands. Two little balls of light. Same day, I was sitting at my desk, staring at the wall next to me, and I could see shapes and stuff moving the wall. That's awesome, man. Did you take anything?
Gnostics talked about. Now, lots of people send me stuff from around the world.
Were you high on anything or what?
I got sent this. I'm not saying that this is real. It might
That's
be a trick
sick,
of the
man.
light. But it does give a visual feel for the way so many of these people have been described to me. With the eyes changing from a human pupil to a reptilian pupil, and then going back again. I've heard that, I've seen people have given me endless accounts of full body shifts. shifts of the upper body, and more than anything, shifts of the eyes. The eyes are the window on the soul, or the window to...
Oh, no, it was just really hot. I was like 11. Oh, I get it. No,
and
dude.
Interestingly, I've got
real,
a
check
friend
this out.
who has an associate
How did 78 people like this and only one disliked it?
I agree with it. Was doing research into iris scanning technology. And this led to him looking through a microscope into, I think it was 2,300 eyes or pairs of eyes. And what he said, he had no idea that my friend was associated with me, probably had no idea I exist. But what he said to my friend was this: of the 2,300 eyes that he scanned, around 4% appeared to be of reptilian type and appearance, and he could not understand what the hell that was all about. And if someone said,
arguably 4%
is I'd say 4
statistically, it's like random.
That's how few it takes to manipulate the world if you get hold of the institutions
that
dictate the world.
What I say to that is that I think 2 standard deviations of data falls within 95%, and that's how statistical significance is determined. So unless you find something more than 5%, you could argue that it's just due to chance alone, that pattern. That's my complete counter argument to that. I'm not disproving what I'm saying is not true. I'm not saying there's a pattern. I'm saying that is at a exactly statistically random probability to occur. It needs to be greater than 5%. Fall within the 2 standard deviations of the data, assuming a normal distribution, which most linear models are based on and significant tests are based on, unless you know some other prerequisite of how the data should be distributed. Normal should be assumed.
So we're looking at people from a visible light point of view that look
Let's
human,
go.
beyond that are not. There you go. He doesn't have to shapeshift Murdoch, does he? I mean, bloody hell.
I see you understand statistical analysis. No, but it's true, man.
But,
I'm not trying to
there you go.
say statistical analysis. It's just
he looks perfectly
it's
human.
just like,
oh, there we go. There's another one. There you go. There you go. Ooh.
you have to be careful when you make a conclusion on something that's less than 5%, because that is literally 1 in 20, right? That's the argument of significance. So unless you have some other data proving that alone comes into question. I'm not saying it applies, but it could be, right?
Oh, there you go. Been to the ritual, Mom? Have you? What's going on? And the other thing is that these bloodlines, they, like I've just said, they stay inside the network, and so that when you follow them back, you tend to come across some interesting people. We've had Prince Charles.
I'm gonna play it definitely.
Last few months,
with the lizard people and Tune.
Talking about
100%.
Royal family's ancestral connection to Vlad the Impaler, one of the most infamous blood-drinking, satanic torturers in human history, who was a member, along with the rest of his family, of something in its simple title called the Order of the Dragon, which goes back into the ancient world, which is the order of these bloodlines. And he was from Transylvania, and old Charles has got a place there. Mary of Teck, her grandmother, was connected genetically very closely down the line to his sister, and thus brought that bloodline into the royal family. There you go. They're not what we think they are. That's the point. And because we only see the visible light level, it seems fantastic. I think, one of the great... Well, no, I'll rephrase that.
Is this it? Is this
the only good thing, from my point of view, of the Diamond Jubilee celebrations was when, at the royal concert, Elton John sang Crocodile Rock to the royal family. I thought that was absolutely frickin' brilliant. And like I say, these bloodlines have no empathy, therefore they have no limits. Pepper bombing cities full of civilians, couldn't give a damn.
Yo, this is perfect for this video, man.
Mercenaries into countries to cause mayhem, as in countries in the Middle and Near East and North Africa, not a problem. There's a lack, no empathy. Another thing is that what people don't realise that one of the fundamentally important influences in human conception and behaviour is called the R-complex by scientists, or the reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain,
when not balanced,
the brains
are different.
Brain, gives us whole bunny behavior.
Not just the eyes, the brain.
Desire to control, obsession with ritualistic behavior. These are so ritualistic in these governments. Everything is ritualistic. And hierarchical structures of power, aggression.
Oh, it's a good song.
Takes all. As let's describe human society as dictated by the crazies. And all this stuff in the royal family, all this royal protocol, all this ritual is all reptilian brain. And if you have a greater infusion of reptilian genetics, you're going to have a greater extreme of reptilian characteristic traits. I mean, did you see that after the royal wedding, when Madam issues another list to update who should bow and curtsy to bloody who? I mean, what a joke! Last I looked, it was the 21st century. Where are we? What's going on? Who calls anymore? It's all over. And we call them the British royal family.
Oh, not Kate Middleton.
They're the German,
No.
Greek, Russian, anything else involved royal
Not
family.
Kate,
Same
not
with all the
sweet
others
Kate.
around bloody Europe. Same bloody family. And
I'm raging
although
for
they're
real.
only symbolic now and for ceremonial purposes.
Who are these people clapping? There's
She talks
78
about my
likes.
government. Why? Because
How are people actually clapping
she
for
talks
this?
about my parliament. It's
Look at
my
this. Look at all the
military,
likes.
my MI5, my MI6,
How?
my courts, my
How?
church. All the people in those organisations, including the representatives of the people, have to say a pledge of allegiance, an oath of allegiance to her, not the people. It's a bloody joke. And this idea that it's symbolic, rubbish. I mean, when you meet the Prime Minister, whoever it is, are you supposed to bow or curtsy? No, but he is to her. Where's the power here? I mean, and what
This is
the-
too much, man. I gotta change it. This is too ridiculous.
Do you know, I feel sad really because these people, they go off to war, put themselves in danger.
Is he seriously claiming that Queen Elizabeth is a lizard?
But, I mean, oh my God, beam me up, Scotty, it's mad down here, get me out, I've had enough. And then there's this royal bloody household that we're paying for.
That's just like offensive. That's like rude. That's pretty rude, man. I know the English are pretty, that royal structure is very oppressive, old, archaic, right? But that's rude, man. Alright. What do I want to search? I want to search, maybe up Scotty, yeah.
So you know I see up in these flames, they can't consume us. Walking through the valley of the kings of the rumor.
Guys, like the song, Gotta Stay Up. Have you heard the song? It sounds pretty dope. It's really poppy, but I think it's pretty cool.
Major Lazer. Here comes the king.
Sure no fear, eh? We made it clear, eh? That the warriors are coming, we no play, eh? We at war with the army of haters, and when we kill them, we just smoke them like vapors. Somebody get me my crown, 'cause I'm feeling it now. It might be low, but here comes the king. You might be alone, but here comes the king.
Here I come, I'm stepping in the dawn. Here I come, I'm stepping in the dawn.
No.
Posted up the
That's
wall,
perfect.
here and I'm a star. Posted up the wall, here and I'm a star. We never fail, we only shine with brilliance. One king, one faith, one religion. And if you hear me
You can't get them off enough. I itch them itch. Check it. Sure. Now seeking you should find a way the Bible tell me. Me and my man I come from far, long time. And I know bloody warrior queen, she a flower. Over here them I talk about it.
Yo, the heliosphere, exactly. Exactly, Pink Elephant. Exactly.
Nothing you can do to make me untrue to my man. To my man. And nothing you can say to make the world straight. To my man. To my man. Check it. Mama talk to my neat and cute and sweet and in a pet him no free greet him rock to the rhythm him move to the beat him dicky hard or dicky not dead. Quarter the night it's evident lead. Fear no style no dread. Balance for me shoulder, balance for me head. Him walk me hard, he make me bad, he make me scream, he make me call me weak.
Yo, we're taking requests. We're taking requests for songs.
Me man a good man, say him no bad man. Me man a strong man, say him no weak man. Me man was a Tarzan, now him a one burner. Me a the woman, a the yacht, him a the bread earner. Me a him heartbeat, me a the apple, I'm higher. He never tell me lie, he never tell me some fire, he never beats me down. No, he never keeps me down. Check it, man out to man, eat and cute and sweet and in a bed, him no free sweet, him rock to the rhythm, him move to the beat, him dig
List 2K must die. Alright.
one of the nights it's evident lead. Fear no style, no dread. Balance for me shoulder, balance for me head. He walk me hard, he make me ball, he make me scream, he make me call me weak. And then tall up. Can't get no sleep, me happy and come to the wake up color. Say tip of the band, that boy is mine, no girl. Your man can't get their right. Check it. No girl can't get their warrior man down one like my bully. No, the man is happy, me man a real like a bad bully. No, just like a dog or washing, I go all I'm fully. No, can manage it, can me, I go drop for me. Watch out, no girl not take their warrior man like up shepherd. No tippy squad, pops are rep out to what a left.
Yo, this is so... How do we get out then? I don't know. They were saying if you had something that created an electromagnetic field, something that rotates very quickly around like a magnet, it can create that. But how fast would it have to go? It's a mean song. Nice. Nice, man. Yo, thanks for these song recommendations. I have them now. Thanks, man.
Yo, listen. Listen.
Attached to a spaceship? Yeah. I'll bring up the video for Dick. So Dick, exactly. I posed the main question. I gotta provide an answer to it. I did find the answer, the theoretical answer, hypothetical answer. But the question is, it's plasma. 90,000 degrees Fahrenheit is plasma, not of like air. So the density is like super low. So what does that mean for like us? Sick song, man.
Yo, listen. Listen.
Yo, that was dope. Start doing hip hop dancing to stuff like this. Yo, that's sick, man. That's awesome, man. Alright, I gotta go get ready. I'm gonna leave I'm not gonna leave music on. I'm gonna leave a video on. For Dick to know what we found about the is it this video? I don't think it's this video. I'm gonna start peace, have fun, be safe. Yo, thanks man. Appreciate it, dude. I'm gonna
I don't know which one, maybe two. Now, in general, plasma is usually associated with things like fire or, the sun itself. But in this case, plasma also exists in certain locations around the solar system and interstellar space. So, as both probes were leaving the solar system, they encountered a sudden density change.
I think the video is Are We Stuck? It was like, are we stuck in our solar system? Wall of... Yo, are we trapped in the solar system? Keep each other accountable. Yo, yeah. Thanks, man. Yo, thanks, Pink Elephant. Yo, Pink Elephant, were you the one that emailed me a song, a link to your song? I really liked your song. I was just super hungover with a huge headache when you sent it, man. I was just going to sign off when you sent it, man.
Well,
I definitely want to
it would
check it
seem
out
that the
again.
sun has given us at least part of the answer. Our star keeps the solar system safe by exerting its magnetic force on those
Here we
that
go.
press in from
This is
it
it right
towards
here.
Space. It shields our planet and our neighbors from foreign EM radiation.
So, this is it. This is for Dick. If we can get out of the solar system, this would be how. Creating an electronic magnetic... Check it out.
So, could one possible solution be some kind of mobile EM field? It would have to be pretty
Electromagnetic.
strong to keep the stormy interstellar space at bay, but hypothetically it could be done. Of course, that technology is likely decades off at best, not to mention the fact that developing a spacecraft that can sustain human life for the multi-thousand-year voyage to the edge of the solar system is a massive undertaking.
It's not fine though. I found you because you're psychedelic DNV VODs. Yo, for sure, man. Yeah, exactly. It was your track. Yeah, man. I want to listen to it again. Yo, I'm gonna have to go get ready. I'm gonna play this video. What should I put on? I'll put on frig, I don't know. A Graham Hancock talking about psychedelics. And then I gotta go in like 20 minutes. I'm not gonna be here. I'm gonna be away for the next 20 minutes. Thank you so much for watching though and everything, man. Also, yo, thanks for the donations. I really appreciate it, like, big time. That's so amazing. Yo, Dick. Exactly. Nice. Oh yeah, the psychedelic. Yeah, I got how it's psychedelic. Interviewed. I don't know if this is boring.
Altered states of consciousness are demonized.
attention.
Universally, it is the visionary plants that are most frequently used by shamans to enter altered states. There are other techniques as well. It's very common for shamans in the shamanistic state of consciousness to report encounters with intelligent supernatural entities, which are usually
I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it here, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to keep it play. Legalize the old word for sure, man.
Animal form. Or
the emotes, pink elephant.
Form. That's
Thanks,
from the Greek therion, which means a wild beast, and anthropos,
sick
which
was a
means
potato.
man. And shamans of all cultures report transformations that they themselves transform
okay,
into
guys, I gotta
animal
go or else
forms,
I'm gonna be late.
As they
Peace
enter
out,
the
yo.
spirit
Thanks, man.
world.
Thanks so much, Big Elephant.
It's
You're the
very
man.
strange, and I'll go into
I'll
this
listen to
here.
your track
that,
again,
that
see what we can
many
play
of the
on
experiences
your.
that shamans report with the entities that they construe
Alright.
as spirits
Peace out,
are
Dick.
pretty much identical
I'll
to
be back in
those
like 20 minutes
that
or so.
people who believe they've been abducted by UFOs.
This is a 30-minute video.
construe as aliens.
I'll be back
and
in 20.
In fact, in quite a lot of shamanistic art, for example, Pablo Amaringo's art, we do see that the spaceship, the flying saucer motif, keeps coming up again and again, mixed with the incredible saturated colors of ayahuasca imagery. If we want a resource background on the phenomenology of shamanism, of course there's a massive literature, and everybody knows of Mercy Eliad's majestic work on shamanism. We have fantastic resources on the experiences of shamans. And thanks to researchers like the late Dr. John Mack from Harvard University and others, we also have a huge dossier of information on the experiences of UFO abductees. And this allows us to compare these two supposedly entirely separate domains, the domain of spirits and the domain of quote-unquote aliens. And I just want to run through some of those similarities. Shamans most frequently encounter spirits in animal or in therianthropic form. And although popular culture puts a lot of emphasis in the UFO literature on greys, so-called grey entity, it's actually the case, if you look at the literature in detail, that many UFO abductees first encounter the aliens in animal form. So Virginia Horton found herself talking with an intelligent grey deer. Another saw a deer looking through her window. Another had a wolf standing squarely on her bed. And John Mack sums it up that the aliens appear to be consummate shape-shifters, taking on many different forms, raccoons, deer, owls, and so on. Very typical shamanistic experience to sense being floated up into the sky, and very specifically to climb a thread or a rope of light into the heavens. And again, these kinds of experiences are reported again and again by UFO abductees. There's, I sort of feel like I'm on an elevator, except there's no walls or anything around it. It's just up fast. Another UFO abductee reports a line or a thread of light extending from her navel. Another sees light like a spider's thread and climbs up it. I'm illustrating here some of the San rock art from South Africa, which illustrates similar experiences. Shamans are not only abducted into the sky, but they're also abducted into underground locations. We see here from one of Pablo's ayahuasca paintings, the shaman being drawn down beneath the Amazon to the city Encante by two therianthropes, two mermaids carried underwater. And many shamans report encountering spirits in cave environments. And as you can see from these texts here, this is also very common with UFO abductees, that they're abducted, plunged into the sea, entering huge crystalline caverns, going to a tunnel beneath the sea. Carlos Diaz finds himself in a cave with stalactites and stalagmites and a UFO. The shamanic ordeal is one of the universal themes of shamanism, the sense of being pierced by spirits, of being tortured by spirits, of undergoing some kind of strange surgery. Very commonly bone counting is reported by shamans. They report bizarre surgical experiences, procedures at the hands of spirits, and they report having objects inserted into their bodies, such as stones, rock crystals, and other objects. It's a universal theme of shamanism, and it's a universal theme of UFO abductions as well. They also regularly report strange surgical procedures that are carried out on them by the supposed aliens. And again, you can read for yourself the examples here. I mean, it's really quite astonishing that a Siberian shaman has his bones counted, and so does a UFO abductee. Shamans are constantly having sex with spirits, and they're having children with spirits as well. I have met a shaman whose wife has left him because of his relationships in the spirit world. And oddly enough, the same thing is reported again and again by UFO abductees. Sex with aliens is a very common experience in the UFO abduction phenomenon, that they have a lover in the alien realm, that they have hybrid offspring, and that they are abducted repeatedly to nurture and cuddle their hybrid child. Shamans sometimes report being given books. Maria Sabina worked with Gordon Wasson famously, was given a book which helped her to do her work better, to know the secrets of the world where everything is known. So was Betty Hill given a book, large luminous pages reclaimed from her. Similarly, Betty Andreasson. And both UFO abductees and shamans tend to return from their experience with a sense of mission, sense of responsibility, and the feeling that they have healing powers. Now another domain, fairies and elves, which became ludicrous just at about the time that UFOs started to appear in our, or to be construed as UFOs in our culture, around about the 1940s, 1950s. They also have an awful lot in common with aliens and spirits, and I want to pay tribute to the fantastic work of Jacques Vallée in his book Passport to Magonia, 1969, which first introduced the notion that there were stunning connections between the experiences of UFO abductees and the experiences of those who'd encountered fairies. What I did in Supernatural, in part, was just to take that dossier of information on from 1969 up to today. So fairies, just like spirits, just like aliens, they were in the business of abducting people. You did not want to get close to the fairy dance. You'd be drawn into it. You'd find yourself in another world. You might sense 2 or 3 hours or an afternoon passing, but when you returned, you would find that 100 years had passed, and that you were just a memory in the village that you'd come from. A little bit like an extreme example of the missing time phenomenon in UFO abductions. Fairies could be cruel, they could torture us, they could also give gifts and healing powers. They had the power of flight. They used all manner of aerial vehicles, which are construed as flying boats, flying castles, flying carriages, etc. Very frequently, fairy abductions would involve being abducted underground into the hollow hills. You can all read the texts here on this page. It's interesting that mushrooms do appear in both of these woodcuts, a clear Amanita muscaria here, and I would bet a psilocybe down here. And fairies and elves also take animal form. It's very common. This is a woodcut from Holland in the 16th century. Shows a group of fairies dancing in a ring. If you look at them closely, you can see that they are therianthropes, part animal, part human in form. Melusine, a feared medieval fairy, part serpent, part woman. She was feared for abducting human babes and substituting a changeling in their place. And well, there are many, many reports of women being abducted to nourish hybrid fairy children, and also in the UFO abduction context to hybrid human alien children. So we humans, we can't look at anything without interpreting it. There's no such thing as interpretation-free perception. Interpretation is built into perception from the get-go. And what I'm suggesting is that actually we're looking at precisely the same cultural phenomenon here, simply viewed through different cultural spectacles, in different periods of history, and construed in different ways. And I believe it's possible to trace this phenomenon very far back in time. If we just remind ourselves of some of the common forms in which aliens and spirits and fairies appear, notably the form of therianthropes. The oldest piece of cave art to have come down to us from anywhere in the world is this piece from Fumani Cave in Italy, a classic therianthrope with the head and horns of some kind of bull, an auroch, and the body of a human being. Hollenstein Stadel Cave, 32,000 years old, carved from mammoth ivory, a lion man. This amazing piece from Chauvet, a bison man, and indeed the bison man appears again and again in the painted caves over a period of more than 10,000 years. The sorcerer, part horse, part stag, part owl, part wolf, part human from Trois-Frères Cave, 17,000 years old. We have to ask ourselves, where did these ideas come from? What was the source of these notions? Clearly, this is not something that is observed in everyday life. And if we pull back from this image, we can see that it's more complex than it appeared at first. There is the bison man here, but he's straddling a female figure. The female figure is headless, and yet her right arm is transforming into the head of a lion. So let's not pretend that we're dealing with somebody dressed up in skins here. What's being captured here is a moment of transformation or shape-shifting from one form to another in a piece of art that is more than 32,000 years old. Look at these strange images from Los Casares Cave in Spain and from Angoulême in France, because it's not only the therianthropic form that appears in the caves. For example, here from Peshmerga, look at that curious profile of that high domed forehead and that narrow pointed chin, the large dark eyes, and some object above the entity there, whatever the entity is. Done a redrawing of that figure, and to my eye it does look a lot like the modern alien idea, the so-called grey. And in fact, you can find objects painted on the walls of the caves that nobody knows what they are. Archaeologists don't have a clue, but they do look astonishingly to me like Pablo Amaringo's paintings of flying saucers, which he saw more as entities or intelligences or even vehicles for entering and leaving the spirit world. Of these three images, two were created more than 20,000 years ago, and one was created in 1990 by one of John Mack's patients. She said that every time the aliens came to abduct her, they would project this pattern into her visual field, and that's how she knew that she was going to be abducted. The modern image is this one, and the ancient images are these. I think we're looking at the same inspiration in every case. I definitely don't take a totally nuts and bolts explanation of this. I don't think that the phenomenon is as simple or as easy as high-tech aliens coming here in incredibly sophisticated spacecraft from the other side of the galaxy. I think it's much more complicated and much more mysterious than that. I've got nothing against physical aliens. I'm sure the universe is full of life, but I don't think that that fully explains this phenomenon, and that actually we can't get to grips with this phenomenon unless we get to grips with altered states of consciousness, DMT and psilocybin being important in some of the research. Now, this was recently published in New Scientist in 6th of March 2011, earliest evidence for magic mushroom use in Europe, from the Selva Pasqualo mural in a cave near the town of Villar del Uomo. And you can see the mushrooms, the psilocybe hispanica, that have been identified in this image. The image is in fact about 6,000 years old, but there's evidence of psychedelic use going back much further than that in the works of art themselves. And just to quickly run through the kind of thing, it's often a combination of an animal and a geometric figure that we see again and again in the cave art, like this grid over here in front of this cow, and here a grid between two ibexes, and here from Altamira these curious patterns and shapes more than 30,000 years old, and again from El Castillo, flows of dots running down a cave wall, strange distorted rectangles and grids. So if we're going to explain cave art, we have to be able to explain all of these different characteristics. And scientific research that was done in the 50s and 60s with psychedelics really do help us to understand what is going on here. The fact that there has been a blockage on research with psychedelics for so long has meant an interruption in the addition of our information, but I hugely welcome the fact that new psychedelic research is now going on. What we need to be doing, however, is not only looking at the therapeutic aspects of this, but looking at the phenomenology and seeing what this means to us about the nature of reality. Again, I'm having to cut a long story extremely short indeed, but those researchers in the 50s and 60s established certain regular patterns which are almost always reported by people on a powerful hallucinogen. And these were given the name entoptic phenomena. And it's really a simple work of deduction. In the case both of the San and the Koso, we were actually told by ethnographers who contacted them before they were wiped out that these artworks were done by their shamans who entered visionary state and returned and depicted on the rock shelters what they had seen in the visionary realm. We can't interview shamans from the Upper Paleolithic, but the fact that the same patterns recur over thousands of years, always involving altered states of consciousness, really makes it certain that the essence of cave art is altered states of consciousness and the shamanistic experience. Those researchers with hallucinogens in the 60s tried to identify a kind of typology, stage 1, stage 2. You go through a vortex, you find yourself in a seamlessly convincing parallel world, and there you encounter intelligent entities. And this one was done by one of the mescaline researchers in the 1960s, one of the subjects. He entered that parallel world, and this was the entity he encountered, dressed in a modern business suit, but with the head of a fox. A classic therianthrope, would have been instantly recognizable despite the business suit to somebody from 30,000 years ago. And in fact, we have really fantastic research on this now. Professor David Lewis Williams at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa has absolutely nailed this down, that altered states of consciousness explain the universal features of cave art. And it's the combination of these patterns, particularly with therianthropic figures, that make it quite certain. So once we accept that altered states of consciousness were involved, then all the strange visionary aspects of cave art make sense, and we can begin to understand the inspiration for such imagery because we've seen such transformations ourselves in altered states of consciousness. This is an area of research into prehistory which I feel is sadly neglected. We do need to really investigate altered states of consciousness if we're going to understand almost any aspect of prehistory. Rick Strassman's amazing work at the University of New Mexico, giving dimethyltryptamine to human volunteers in the 1990s, really helps to bring all this together. Actually, we're all illegal in this room. I'm sure everybody knows we do all have DMT in our bodies. It's found in blood plasma urine. It's a natural brain hormone. And it's the first psychedelic to be known to be produced naturally by the body, and nobody knows why it's there. It's thought that it's produced in the pineal gland. And the pineal gland was originally a sense organ. Lizards and amphibians, the pineal gland actually still contains a lens, a cornea, and a retina. It's sunk deeper into the brain in humans. It's not sensitive to light anymore, but I would suggest that it is still a sense organ, and that dimethyltryptamine is the lens that is being applied to the senses through the pineal gland. So if we just look briefly at some of the experiences reported by Rick Strassman's volunteers, we can see that they cross over into these other domains. These guys were on a hospital bed in the University of New Mexico. They were not being physically abducted anywhere, but it appears that their consciousness was being abducted. Carl sees a lot of elves. Ben has something inserted into his left forearm. Fiber optic things probing into his pupils. A space station is mentioned. Again and again, the experiences of these volunteers is very, very similar to or identical to the experiences reported by UFO abductees. And oddly enough, a number of the volunteers reported being told almost the same things by the entities they encountered. Basically, we're so glad you've discovered this technology. Now we can communicate with you more often, meaning DMT. So more than half of the volunteers actually reported experiences that are directly comparable with those of UFO abductees. And this needs to be explained. Rick is of the view that UFO abductees may be individuals who spontaneously overproduce dimethyltryptamine in the brain. It puts them into a trance state, and then they have this experience. And it's really important to emphasize that Rick is absolutely clear that this does not imply that such experiences are just your brain on drugs, or that such experiences are not real. It's very bad logic that leads us to conclude that such experiences are not real. If we want to look, well, to make this point, there is a reductionist model in Western science. It is the model of Western science, which wishes to reduce everything to physical processes. And many scientists will say, when you're on a hallucinogen, areas of your brain light up or shut down, and they will reduce the experience to those physical or biochemical changes in the brain. They will say that the experience is nothing more than what is happening in the brain. There is no reality to the experience. Just to show how stupid that is, consider the issue of a telescope. If you want to look at a very distant star with your telescope, you're going to have to point it at the right area of the sky, and then you're going to have to focus it. As you focus it, physical changes will take place within the barrel of the telescope in the relationship between the lenses. Eventually, the star will come into view. You'd be completely wrong to say that the star is the physical changes inside the barrel of the telescope. That's absolute rubbish. Those physical changes have simply enabled you to see the star. And this is the suggestion with the physical changes that go on in altered states of consciousness, that they may be allowing us to see into an expanded or far wider reality than our normal brain state constrains us to. Rick speaks about channel normal, that we're all tuned in pretty much to channel normal, to living in the physical realm. But that there are many other channels broadcasting at us all the time, and that maybe what the hallucinogens do, that we shouldn't think of the brain as a generator of consciousness, but rather as a receiver or a transceiver of consciousness. And what they do is they alter the receiver wavelength of the brain, rather as the telescope alters the focal capacities of the eye, allowing us to see that which we could not see with our basic senses. And Rick is quite open to the notion that what we're seeing into is parallel universes, freestanding parallel universes. That's just as likely as this being just entirely something generated within the brain. So perhaps we don't need the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva, Switzerland to enter parallel universes or explore their secrets. Perhaps the universe has already given us the equipment. It's called our brains, and all we have to do is adjust the receiver wavelength of our brain to make contact with other realms and the entities that inhabit them. It's just a fact that at the moment that the great cave art began to appear, humanity went through an extraordinary behavioral change. It was as though we were shaken out of millions of years of rigidity. By this time, 40,000 years ago, our ancestors had been anatomically modern for more than 150,000 years. But the behavior was not modern. And you get this sudden transformation in behavior, really the dawn of spirituality, at the same time that you encounter the great cave art. And it's been suggested with good reason that possibly human language even came from those experiences that made the cave art possible. In other words, experiences with psychedelics. That certainly it suggests that psychedelics were transformational in the Stone Age, and as we know, they were transformational in the 60s and 70s as well. Both Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak have said that they would never have done what they did if it hadn't been for LSD. And Steve Jobs used to employ programmers preferentially if they were experienced with LSD. So I think in closing, there's a huge amount to suggest that these substances, these psychedelics, have got absolutely nothing to do with brain candy and everything to do with transformation. That they are transformational entities, transformational intelligences, which have a huge and important role to play in the human story, which allow us to connect with nature and sense our place within nature once again, which we have so grievously lost. So what a huge mistake we may be making in our society today by demonizing and persecuting and creating an atmosphere of fear and paranoia and hatred around the issues of altered states of consciousness. We may be literally preventing the next step forward in our own evolution. Thank you. I believe that that if we're not sovereign over our own consciousness, and I'm echoing many other speakers here, if we're not sovereign over our own consciousness, if we're prepared to tolerate living in a society that will not allow sovereignty of an adult over his or her own consciousness, then we cannot be claimed to be free in any way. It's absolutely absurd and crazy for the Western democracies to be going around the world imposing democracy by force on other cultures, when we actually live in a consciousness tyranny, where it is even dangerous to speak out about these issues. We live in an atmosphere of witch hunt around this. And so that's why I hugely welcome conferences of this sort, which can become nodal points for a global change in consciousness, and to realize that these plants are our allies and our friends. They have co-evolved with us. They are here to help us, and my goodness, there has never been a time when the human race has been more urgently in need of its plant allies than today. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Yo, one viewer, I'm just about to leave.
Here we go. And boom, we're live. Graham, great to see you again.
Nice to be back with you, Jeff.
And we were just talking about your new book, America Before that. There's two versions of it. There's one version, and then there's a newer version that's a Barnes & Noble version that's specific to Barnes & Noble that has an extra whole chapter in it.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and so they can get that at Barnes & Noble. I'm just trying to keep bookstores alive, man. They're on the way out.
I think it's really important, and that's one of the reasons that I did this, because I had